Hey guys, how are you all? Welcome to Let's Start Story on What If Naruto was joined ANBU and left Konoha village with Sakura. So do 4 blue hearts. Comment, be sure to subscribe to our channel and like this video, and please share with your friends and watch till end. Also check out Patreon for I have upload Harry x Hermione uncensored spicy version, link in description. They entered a dimly lit nightclub where they spent a few nights out of the month with some of their closest friends. The music was loud, the beat was fast, and it was a way to escape from the realities that went with being ninja. Sakura and Naruto walked through the throngs of people looking for their friends when they spotted Ino waving at them from a table clear across the crowded room. "So where have you two been?" Ino asked Sakura as she joined them at their table. The members of Team 10 and Sai were already waiting for them at a table when Sakura and Naruto walked up. Sakura was wearing a red mini skirt and a black short-sleeved blouse that showed off her womanly curves. She had let her hair grow out longer than how she wore it as a genin, and she had it tied up in a loose braid. Naruto walked in wearing a black, long-sleeved turtleneck and orange cargo pants, longer versions of ones he used to wear as a kid. Naruto had hit the last of his growth spurts and was now a head taller than Sakura, and he had slightly broader shoulders than his father had at his age. To say that they both were looking good would be an understatement. "We just had a little something to take care of with Yamato Taicho," replied Sakura calmly. The one thing out of place was a bandage that covered a rather fresh tattoo on her left shoulder that just barely peeked out from under her short sleeve. "Sakura, what's that?" Ino said, pointing to her left shoulder. "Nothing," the pink-haired kunoichi replied, pulling her sleeve down a little lower. "Is that a tattoo? You guys really did it, didn't you? You got into ANBU." "Shish. Not so loud, Ino Buddha," she shushed back. ANBU members were supposed to be anonymous, but it was no secret among their friends that they had applied at the suggestion of Tsunade and Kakashi. "Fine. Forehead. Be that way," Ino said, turning to the guys for support, but finding none. "Oi Naruto, Sakura, what will you have to drink?" asked Shikamaru, quite ready to get the attention away from his noisy blonde teammate. "Just the usual," replied Naruto. "Sakura. Same here." Shikamaru motioned to the waitress as Naruto and Sakura took seats opposite each other. Naruto sat on the same side of the booth next to Shikamaru. Sakura sat next to Ino. This left Choji and Sai up against the wall on the far side of the table. Choji had found the bowl of chips as usual. He was now more muscle than he was growing up, making him look like a well-built sumo wrestler. Sai just looked like an older version of his younger self, a little taller and a little more filled out. Shikamaru looked almost like a copy of his father, minus the scars. "How's the arm?" Sai asked Naruto. He was sitting next to Ino, who had her hand on his thigh, but he didn't really seem to notice. "It's not as bad as it was. I like that stuff you gave me earlier to put on it," he replied. "Naruto, when are you going to learn it isn't the cream that works so well?" "Mine still hurts like crazy," said his pink-haired teammate. Her tattoo was starting to itch and she was trying not to touch it. Naruto shot Sakura a look of amused affection out of the corner of his eye, but no one seemed to know. Tice, as the waitress was returning with their drinks. "Thanks," he said to the waitress before turning to Shikamaru. "So Shika, how's Tamari?" Naruto asked with a fox-like grin on his face. Shikamaru had finally admitted that he had other reasons to take all those trips to Suna lately after Naruto's endless badgering for the last month. It seemed that he and Tamari were getting serious, and it was mutual because the Suna kunoichi was in Konoha almost as often as he was in Suna. "She's fine, but I'm getting tired of making that troublesome trip across the desert. There's got to be an easier way." He trailed off, looking out a nearby window at a dark sky. "Man, you've got it bad," teased Naruto. "So when are you going to talk her into moving to Konoha?" "As soon as her brother, the Cage, feels he no longer needs her in Suna." "At this rate that could be never," replied a rather frustrated Shikamaru. "She seems pretty content with how things are between us at the moment." "Troublesome woman. You could ask her to marry you," interjected Choji in between mouthfuls, "and risk the wrath of the Cage at the loss of his best Junin." "I'm not sure I'm ready for that." "Troublesome woman," Shikamaru replied with a sweat drop. "How about you, Naruto? When are we going to see you get wrapped around a woman's finger?" The shadow user said, changing the subject away from himself. Hee, who knows? He laughed, scratching the back of his head. Not even his close friends knew about him and Sakura. They had been dating in secret for the past 4 years in fear that Akatsuki or even the Hokage might find out and use it against him. It was no secret that Danzo didn't like the Jinchuriki, and it wasn't beneath him to use anything he could to make Naruto's life miserable. He only let Naruto go in ANBU because he thought it would make him easier to control. I thought you still had feelings for Ugly here, Sai said, referring to Sakura. Sakura blushed, but it was more because of the anger she felt at Sai's nickname for her than anything. Watch it, pale face, she growled, looking as if she would reach over Ino and punch him at any second. Sai leaned behind Ino a bit as if using her as a shield. Now, forehead. I'm sure Sai was just opening his mouth to insert his foot as usual, Ino said, trying to calm down her friend. It didn't pass her by that Sakura got upset pretty quick whenever Sai insulted Naruto. But then again, it didn't take much to make Sakura angry these days. I read somewhere that when you like someone you are supposed to support them during an argument, Sai said. Looking down at the blonde-haired Kunoichi. Really, Sai, I wouldn't have to keep supporting you if you found a book worth quoting, Ino replied. Don't worry about it, Sai. Sakura and I have an understanding. If neither one of us is seeing anyone by the time I'm Hokage, we'll get married, Naruto said as his eyes danced. Of course he has to live to be Hokage, notwithstanding me killing him personally. She added, trying her best to hide the tender look behind the glare she was shooting him. He just laughed and scratched the back of his head again. Don't tell me you were waiting for Sasuke-kun to return still. Ino gave her a look of disgust. No, Ino, that dream ended long ago, she replied with a far-off look in her eyes as she remembered her first kiss with Naruto. She took a sip of her drink, hoping it would relax her just enough to put up with Ino tonight. Ino motioned for her to get up so that she could get out of the booth and proceeded to drag Sakura off toward the bar. Come on, forehead. I need a refill, said Ino as she took Sakura by the arm, pulling her away from the boys. Hello, Konoha, to Sakura, where did you disappear to just now? There is something you're not telling me, cried the queen of gossip. No, it's nothing, Sakura said as she waved off her friend's suspicion. The guys didn't seem to notice them leave and had fallen into a conversation of their own about women problems. Ino and Sakura could catch the occasional, troublesome woman, coming from Shikamaru's direction. Come on, you're definitely hiding something from me. Okay, so maybe there has been someone else since my crush on Sasuke. But he's no one you know, she said, trying her best to hide her annoyance with her persistent friend. It was getting harder and harder to hide her feelings for her blonde teammate. But she only did it because she wanted to protect someone precious to her. Finally, I knew you were hiding something from me. So, is he still in the picture? No, he's old news. Shish. He could see Naruto glance at her out of the corner of her eye. So, is there anyone who is news? No. Ah, come on, forehead, there has to be someone you like, Ino pouted. Don't tell me you like Naruto. Naruto is just too Naruto. Sakura sighed. There hasn't been any time for dating, Ino, you know that. Between Akatsuki, the Junin exams, applying for ANBU, the hospital, and our regular missions, I haven't had the time. You know better than anyone how much a slave driver Tsunade has been since losing her office as Hokage. Fine. Don't think I'll let you off that easy though. You're turning into an old maid. Of course if you wait just a bit longer, Sai might be available, Ino confessed. I thought you and Sai were exclusive. We are, but I don't know, there just isn't much of a connection anymore. Besides, I've met someone new. Oh. Sakura asked, taking another sip of her drink that she managed to grab from the table before being dragged away from it. Ino had been going through men like they were flavors of ice cream, and Sai was only the most recent of her favorite flavors. He's a civilian, but he's quite the looker. Father had him over for an interview at the Flow our shop last week, and there was just something about him. Ino, there is always just something about your latest conquest. Anyway, why would I date Sai? There is just something so wrong about dating teammates, Sakura said, looking bored. She loved Ino to death, but she was always so indecisive when it came to men. Not that long ago Ino thought there was just something about her socially awkward teammate. They could hear the music coming from the dance floor and it seemed that more and more people were leaving the booths to dance. Not too many things had been positive since Konoha had been rebuilt and Danzo was made Hokage. But they did have a few more nightclubs added since being rebuilt and the younger generation of ninjas took advantage of this. Sakura could see Naruto coming toward them out of the corner of her eye. "Care to dance?" Naruto said as he offered his hand to Sakura. She looked like she could use a break from Ino's badgering. "I would love to," Sakura replied, taking his hand. She shot a triumphant look over her shoulder at Ino as she had just been given an escape from their conversation. "How come you never ask me to dance?" an annoyed Ino said, shooting a glance at Sai as she walked back toward their table. "Want to dance?" he asked, almost out of defense. "Thought you'd never ask," she said sarcastically. Naruto guided Sakura to the dance floor as a slow song began to play. He put his arms around the waist of his teammate, and she put her arms around his shoulders, careful not to give in to her urge to hold him close. They swayed gently to the music, hoping the volume of the music would drown out their conversation. "Sorry about Ino," Naruto began. "I hope she's not getting to you too much." He gazed into her jade eyes, the desire in his eyes conveying what he longed to tell her in words. Sakura looked into his deep blue eyes. She could get lost in them so easily. She glanced down quickly, hoping no one would notice how she had been looking at him. "It's okay. But she just makes me so mad with her constant flirting and questions about my love life as if she's waving hers in my face. I promise you, Sakura, one day we won't have to hide anymore," he said, flashing her his famous smile. "Naruto, if you make any more promises you'll never have a day of rest as long as you live," she teased as she looked into his eyes. He couldn't help but laugh. How cute she looked when she looked at him like that. She truly made him the happiest man alive no matter what was going on in the world around them at the moment. Naruto saw Sai and Ino making their way toward them on the dance floor and he stiffened up. Sakura noticed his reaction and looked in the direction he was looking in. Seeing her rival in all things, she knew why he had reacted the way he did. If Ino even suspected for 1 second that they liked each other more than teammates, it could be all over. It was no secret that the queen of gossip could spread news rather quickly, and there was no telling what Danzo would do if he found out. "Naruto, I didn't know you could dance," teased Ino as they danced beside them. "I'm not called the world's most surprising ninja for nothing, Ino. Hey Sakura, switch with me. I want to make sure I'm not caught in someone's genjutsu," she said rather flirtatiously toward Naruto. Sakura looked into Naruto's face and he nodded to let her know that it was okay. She released her hold on him and she reluctantly switched partners with Ino. "Don't you mind, Sai?" she asked once she was in Sai's arms. He was surprisingly holding his own on the dance floor. "Not much. Whatever Ino wants, Ino gets." He looked at his former dance partner almost with a hint of regret in his eyes. The music picked up and Naruto moved to twirl Ino around to the beat of the music. "Sai, if I didn't know any better I'd say you were jealous," teased Sakura sarcastically. "I read in a book that a man should feel jealous when one's girlfriend flirts with other men, but to tell you the truth, I don't think Ino and I are meant to be," he said calmly. Sakura was a little taken aback at her teammate's confession but decided to change the subject. Truthfully, it made her feel a little awkward learning of her friend's failing relationship. They danced until the song ended, then both couples walked back to sit down at their table. Shikamaru had ordered another round of drinks for all of them and he was obviously in the mood to celebrate tonight for the success of his friends making it into ANBU. Sakura couldn't help but notice the half-hearted flirting going on between Ino and Sai. She almost wished that she could just put them both out of their misery, but decided it wasn't her place to say anything. It was best just to let those two work it out in their own time. The rest of the guys didn't seem to notice anything out of the ordinary and Sakura decided to shrug it off and join in on the fun. As the evening progressed, the guys seemed pretty well relaxed. And to everyone's surprise, Choji was hitting it off on the dance floor with several of the regular girls. Sakura always thought of him as a great big teddy bear and it never occurred to her that he might actually be dating material. Naruto was also a favorite on the dance floor as several girls seemed to have their sights set on him. Sakura had to admit he had grown up to be quite the eye candy. Hat black turtleneck hugged his well-defined muscles just right, and she was having a hard time not staring at him as it was. It was also hard hiding her jealousy at all the attention the fangirls were giving him. But he seemed oblivious to their advances, and she knew where his loyalties lied. Naruto seems to be enjoying himself, Shikamaru said, turning to Sakura. Ino and Sai had once again hit the dance floor, leaving just Sakura and Shikamaru at their table. He looked rather bored, and Sakura was sure it had to do with the absence of a certain Sunakunoichi. Yeah, he still can't get used to all the attention he gets from the fangirls now. We were all busy with Sasuke growing up, and he has admitted to being a little lost as to what to do with the attention. She laughed as she saw a pair of girls arguing over who was the next to dance with him. He just stood back and scratched his head, obviously looking rather clueless as the two girls argued over him. Excuse me, Sakura said as she got up from the table. She had had enough of the fangirls and went to go rescue her boyfriend. Naruto, I believe I was next, she said, sidestepping the surprised pair as she walked into his arms. Gladly, he said, sweeping her up as they moved away to the beat of the music, leaving the fangirls frustrated and fuming. Thank you, he said, looking rather relieved at her arrival. No problem. You rescued me once already tonight, and I figured I'd return the favor, she replied. He spun her around to the music, and she felt a little lightheaded. She couldn't tell if it was the alcohol finally getting to her, or the rush of emotion she felt whenever she was in his arms. Oh, if only it was just the two of them out there on the dance floor. Sakura, tell me something, do you think we did the right thing joining ANBU? I don't see why there is any reason not to be. I thought you wanted to be in ANBU. I did, I mean I do. It's just that something has been bugging me since this morning. The Hokage seemed rather happy while he watched us get our tattoos and uniforms. There is just something about his expression that seems out of place. I just can't put my finger on it. Tsunade never did trust that man. But I'm sure it's fine and you were just imagining things. Besides, how else are you going to get the experience you need before becoming Hokage? Even Kakashi was insistent that the people follow their leader better when he's been through the same experiences as those he leads. True, true. I have you by my side, so I guess whatever comes our way we can deal with it together, he said, smiling down at her with the smile he reserved only for her. She could feel her face flush from the attention he was giving her. No matter what, she had the hardest time hiding her feelings for him in public. Even after years of practice, he could still make her lose control of them at the drop of a hat. The song ended and they moved back to their table where Shikamaru was still sitting. He always said it was too troublesome to dance and was content to sit and watch his friends make fools of themselves. Guys, I think I'm going to call it a night. We have to report early in the morning, eh? I would like to get some sleep before then, Sakura said as she put her share of the tab on the table. I'll walk you home. You never know what kinds of weirdos are out there this time of night. Naruto offered as he tossed a few ryu of his own on the table. I hope you aren't referring to yourself, Baka, Sakura teased. Tell Tamari hi for me next time you see her. Night guys, Shikamaru said, not seeming to mind being left to his thoughts. Sakura-chan, Naruto whined as they moved toward the exit. Did you have to go that far? He said, referring to being called a weirdo. You know I love you, right? She replied, giving him the cutest innocent look she could manage while being under the influence of several drinks. I'm beginning to wonder, he shot back sarcastically. She just led her eyes and turned in the direction of her apartment. She was glad she had moved out of her parents' house a couple of years ago, and it made life a lot easier when she didn't have to explain to our parents about how much time she spent with Naruto outside of missions and training. When they reached her door, she just barely managed to get out her key before she felt arms snake around her waist. Naruto, what are you doing? I can't help it. You just look too damn sexy in that skirt. Well, you could at least wait until we get inside, she said as she unlocked the door. Once opened, they ducked inside and closed it behind them. Naruto wasted no time in placing kisses on the exposed skin on her neck. Sakura let out a moan of pleasure and turned around to face him. His lips met hers and they locked passionately. Sakura's hands moved up to cup his cheeks and he made soft moans as she stroked the whisker marks there. He couldn't resist the rush that having his whiskers stroked gave him. And he deepened the kiss, only ending it to come up for air. They were both left panting from the rush of emotion and endorphins as they looked into each other's eyes in the moonlight that came in through the window. "You know I can't control myself when you do that, Sakura-chan," Naruto said, looking deep in her jade-green eyes. She could tell he was excited by the way his voice wavered. "If we aren't careful, there is no telling what I might do." "Why do you think I do it then?" she said, returning his gaze. No matter how hard she tried, she always felt like she could drown in those deep blues. "Besides, I need to make sure that you aren't thinking of any of those little fangirls that were all over you tonight. Sakura, you know those girls mean nothing to me. They are just good cover so that no one sees how crazy I am about you," he said as he started to work his way down her neck in gentle kisses. If her stroking his whiskers was what drove him wild, it was him kissing her neck like this that made her lose all self-control. She had to take a deep breath to regain her composure before pushing him back a step so that she could look in his eyes. "Naruto, as much as I love it when you do that. I was serious when I said I need sleep before tomorrow. I don't want to be half asleep during our first mission in ANBU." Her expression was deadly serious as she spoke, and he sighed in defeat. "All right, I'll restrain myself this time. However, next time you tease me like that you might not be so lucky," he said, giving her a look that was full of lust and mischief. He gave her one last passionate kiss before turning to go. "I love you," he said as he made to open her door. She stopped him before he could turn the handle and got up on her tiptoes and gave him one last passionate kiss in return. "I love you, too." He brushed some of her pink bangs off of her face and he was gone before another moment passed, leaving her alone in her entryway. Sakura let out a deep sigh and removed her heels. "Maybe I should have made him stay long enough to rub my feet. They are killing me," she thought to herself, although, there is no telling how much sleep I would have ended up with. She walked off toward her bathroom to get ready for bed the same moment as a blonde outside looked up toward her window. "Aishiteru, Sakura-chan," he said under his breath before walking off toward his own apartment. Naruto and Sakura met with the other new ANBU recruits the very next morning for their meeting before their first mission. They were all in the standard ANBU gear consisting of a black sleeveless turtleneck, black pants and boots, gray armored vest and arm protectors. Each member had a short sword on their back, much like the one Sai normally wore. Everyone had their masks on, and even they did not know the identity of their fellow ANBU members other than by their code names and by what mask they wore. Naruto had chosen a nondescript mask with a single orange diamond shape over the left eye. Sakura had picked a mask that looked more like a jungle cat with small pointy ears and 3 red whiskers on each cheek. There were a total of 9 rookies in their group, and they assumed their new Taicho was the veteran ANBU wearing the white cloak. There was one other ANBU member in the room, and Sakura knew it was Sai. She had accidentally found his mask once when they had been hanging out at his apartment. He had been ordered back to ANBU 6 months ago. Sai had mentioned something about the Hokage reorganizing Black Ops, but he never stated the obvious that Danzo was mixing in more root members into leadership positions once held by members loyal to Tsunade. Their new unit commander spoke in a low, quiet voice. It must have served him well on missions. As of today you are members of ANBU Black Ops. You no longer have an identity as soon as you put that mask on. You are a tool and will be used as such. Emotions, feelings, bonds, family, and friends do not matter here. All that matters is the mission. You will put what's best for Konoha ahead of every one of your priorities. You will do whatever it takes to get the mission done. There will be no questioning of authority. You will be receiving training during the mission in various techniques ranging from interrogation to elemental. Each team will consist of 4 members, much like the teams you have been used to. There will be 1 veteran ANBU member per 3 rookies. This first mission will be explained to you by your Taicho. Any question concerning the mission will be directed towards them. I will now assign you to your new teams. Sakura could tell that Naruto wasn't too happy with the little speech he just heard, and she could tell by the way his muscles tensed in his bare shoulders that he was fighting back his emotions. She didn't like the tool analogy any better than her teammate, and she knew that he was reminded of Haku. Sai had warned them both before the meeting that it was better to keep one's mouth shut than risk discipline. This was going to be very hard for Naruto to overcome his emotions. Maybe this was why Tsunade and Kakashi had suggested that they join. Their Taicho brought in veteran ANBU agents and quickly split them up into their new units. Fortunately for them, Sakura and Naruto were on the same team. Their Taicho was a short yet rather muscular man with spiky brow and hair that had an almost gray tint to it. Their other teammate was a tall male with red hair. Their new Taicho didn't waste much time explaining their first mission. It was an intelligence mission and they were to sneak into a neighboring village and find out the required information, then report back as soon as possible. It seemed easy enough, but they were going to work on improving their shinobi Airijutsu stealth and entering methods art, and Johu Kaishu information gathering. They were now Rookie Team 3 and it was time to move out. Their Taicho briefed them on the jutsu that they were going to use while racing through the treetops on the way to their destination village. Sakura looked up at Naruto as he jumped from a branch higher than hers. The muscles in his arms were tense and she knew he was taking this new role as a member of ANBU seriously. Before long they were at the edge of the village. They were to wait until the cover of darkness before beginning their infiltration. This allowed them a little time to read over the jutsu scrolls that they were given when they arrived at ANBU headquarters that morning. They sat in silence, which seemed to be the standing order between members of ANBU. It made it easier to break bonds if they were never formed in the first place. As soon as it was dark, their Taicho motioned for them to follow him. He motioned to Sakura to approach the building first, followed by the red-headed man, and Naruto came last. Sakura proceeded to use one of the new jutsu to open the locks of one of the upstairs windows and let her team enter the building ahead of her. Once inside, Naruto and the redhead kept watch while Sakura found the cabinet that held the information they needed. She pulled the scrolls from their resting place and opened them on a nearby table. She pulled out some blank ones of her own and proceeded to go through a series of hand signs. This allowed her to perfectly copy the information from the original documents to the blank scrolls. She silently signaled to her teammates when she was completed, and her Taicho checked her work before they resealed the scrolls and returned them in the exact manner in which they were originally stored. Naruto helped her gather up the scrolls and he watched while his team retreated out the window. It was on to the next building where it was Naruto's turn to practice the same jutsu that Sakura had just used on both the locks and documents. This kept them busy for the rest of the night until they took turns retrieving all of the information that the Hokage had required. Once they returned to headquarters, they turned over all their information to their unit commander and they were allowed to return home once their own mission reports were completed. No one said, "Good job," as they turned in their reports. It was just show up, do your job, and go home. This was going to take some getting used to. After changing back into their everyday clothes, Naruto was waiting for Sakura outside the woman's locker room. She could tell he had a lot on his mind. Truthfully, Sakura had a lot she needed to process as well. "Care to join me?" he said as she fell in step beside him. "I was going to Ichiraku's before heading home. It's already past lunchtime and these solider pills they gave us are not keeping my appetite down at all." "Only if you pay," she said, shooting him up a teasing smile. He chuckled at their long-time inside joke. He had promised a long time ago that he would pay whenever he dragged her to Ichiraku's, but she liked to rub it in that he had refused once and ended up eating alone. They walked along for a while not saying anything. It wasn't an uncomfortable silence, but they both had a lot to process after their first few days on the job. Sakura was the first to break their silence. "So, what did you think about yesterday's mission?" "I think it is going to take some getting used to, Datbeo," he said, looking down at her. She could tell that holding in his exuberant nature was draining for him emotionally by the way he was looking at her. "The work is manageable enough right now, but it may take a while to become what they seem to want us to be. I wonder if Tsunade Bachan ever had it quite that emotionless when she was Hokage. I remember watching her talk to her agents when I was at her office every day. There was definitely a tradition of anonymity. But they still seemed like humans. Now they remind me of Sai when we first met him." No wonder Sai seemed so reluctant to go back. They had reached Ichiraku's at this point in the conversation and Naruto was just glad to get some real food in his stomach. He ordered one large miso ramen with the works. However, Sakura wasn't feeling that hungry, so she only ordered a small tempura ramen. Naruto noticed this and he knew very well that she had a hard time eating when she was stressed. I take it I'm not the only one with a lot on my mind, he said, pointing to her small meal. I'm sorry, Naruto. I'm just not feeling that hungry today. Maybe I'll go do a little training before I head home. He knew when she was going to do a little training, that she was in the mood to destroy a small mountain. Do you want someone to train with? I'm not really that tired and I could use a little practice on some of the new jutsu they're teaching us. No, I think I need to train alone today. Thanks for the offer though. She looked down at her meal before she continued, maybe we could meet after dinner time and do something other than work-related activities. I'm not all that tired and I think I'll just go to bed at my normal time. She looked up and gave him a tender smile. Naruto seemed to relax at the idea of doing something with Sakura later and he outwardly returned to his old smiley self. Sounds like a plan to me, he said, flashing her that famous grin of his. Sakura finished her meal and got up to leave. No matter how hard they denied their feelings for each other in public, it didn't make it any easier to just walk away from each other. She bid him a quick farewell and headed toward the training grounds. Naruto longingly watched her back as she left and it didn't go unnoticed by Ayame who was behind the counter. Naruto, when are you going to get serious about Sakura? She asked while she leaned over the counter. What do you mean by that, Ayame-ni-chan? He exclaimed, eyes wide in surprise. He always remembered to bury his feelings around other ninja, but he had forgotten just now in front of the ramen mistress. I saw the way you were looking at her. I've worked here long enough to know what a man looks like when he's dreaming after a certain woman, she said with a glimmer in her eye. She knew she was right and there was no easy way for him to deny it. In fact, she had seen that same look in her husband's eyes many, many times. Ayame-ni-chan, it's no secret that I've liked Sakura since we were little. There is just no way for me to do anything about it right now, he said, giving her the white lie. And why not? She wasn't going to let this go easily. She must have picked up some scolding tricks from Iruka. She and Iruka had just had their first child 6 months ago after all. It's just complicated. Right now just isn't a good time to start anything, he said, looking down at his bowl. By the way, can I get another ramen? Sure. Don't think this is the end of our conversation though. If you waste any more time there's never going to be a good time to start anything. She didn't realize how right she was, which reminded him he had planned on going to the jewelry store after work before Sakura had managed to distract him. He was brought back to the present when she brought him his second bowl of the day. He let out a big sigh before starting. This time he was lucky that Ayame didn't notice. Naruto, is that you? He heard someone call from the street behind him. Naruto turned around to see a tall, rather shapely brunette with olive green eyes standing behind him. Yakumo, I haven't seen you for a really long time. Kurenai-sensei said that you had moved to another village with the rest of the Kuramo clan, he said, getting up to greet her. He was surprised that she gave him a great big hug out of the blue. I was hoping that I'd run into you, Naruto. I was in town visiting Kurenai-sensei and she said that you might be here. She looked up at him with a tender look that surprised him a little. Yakumo was only a little taller than Sakura, but she seemed to almost be eye to eye with him. He nervously pushed her back a step as he was feeling a little awkward. Nay, how have you been? He said nervously. All the ninja training in the world still did nothing to help him when it came to dealing with women. It didn't help when he couldn't play the girlfriend card as much as he really wanted to. I've been good. I've been training in genjutsu with my clan, but I had family business in the village so I thought I'd drop by to say hi while I was here. Anyo. I was just finishing up lunch. Would you care to join me? He said out of politeness more than anything. Sure, she said as they ducked back inside Ichiraku's. Ayame gave him a questioning look but didn't say anything as she took Yakumo's order. Yakumo ordered some ramen and they fell into a pleasant conversation. She seemed a little flirtatious to Naruto. But he had fangirls now whenever they went to the clubs, so he wasn't completely oblivious to her advances. Oh, how he wished Sakura, or anyone for that matter, would come rescue him right about now. They finished their meal and it seemed that Yakumo wanted to visit with him a little longer, so he decided it was only polite to walk around town with her. She had actually grown up to be a well-rounded person and surprisingly good company. They did share similarities of being alone when they were little and that helped give them a basis for conversation. He had only seen her a couple of other times. since he had met her back before he left to train with Jiraiya, but he hadn't noticed until now that she seemed to want to get to know him as more than a passing acquaintance. They passed by the Yamanaka flower shop and he saw Ino working behind the counter. Ino spotted him and waved to him and he nervously waved back. Maybe he shouldn't have taken this road. Naruto was sure that Ino would be talking to Sakura later about seeing him with an unknown girl. Yakumo saw something in a nearby art store window and pulled him toward it unwillingly. Of course Ino missed none of this and was watching with interest. "So, how long are you going to be in town?" he asked. "I'm leaving this afternoon. Family business doesn't allow for me to stay very long," she replied. She was looking at a display of art supplies as he spoke. "That's good to hear, Datbeo," he thought to himself. "I take it you still paint." "A little. My family has helped me to find other outlets for my genjutsu." They toured around Konoha until it was time for her to go. She left him after giving him a great big hug that he nervously returned. He decided that maybe he had had enough shopping for one day and that doing a little training sounded like a good idea. When Sakura hears Ino's point of view, it could cause trouble for him later. "Sit still, would you? I swear it's true what they say, doctors really do make the worst patients," Ino said as she wrapped Sakura's very bloody left hand. "Why didn't you go get this taken care of at the hospital instead of coming to me?" "Because you don't scold quite as loud as Shiso does. As long as I can pull my glove over it, no one will know that it's bandaged," Sakura replied. She had apparently done a little damage to one of the training grounds and had gotten a little beat up in return. Sakura was covered from head to toe in dirt from her afternoon of training. "Ouch. Didn't you wear any gloves while you were redesigning the training grounds?" Ino said with a smirk. "Yes, Mom. I guess I need a new pair of gloves," she replied sarcastically. Sakura winced as Ino finished taping the last of the bandage to her hand. "There, all done. By the way, you'll never guess who I saw this afternoon with a new girl on his arm," she said, sing-songing the last half of her news. "Let me guess, Choji," Sakura said in a lame attempt to play along. "No, but good guess. He met someone at the club after you guys left the other night." "Guess again. Shino. You are so far off it's pathetic." Forehead, Ino said in triumph. "Fine, Ino Buddha, who is it?" "Naruto. He had this very tall and sexy babe on his arm and they were walking around town together in plain sight of everyone," Ino said. She was obviously having fun waving this little piece of news in front of Sakura. "Naruto. Now why should I believe you? He's not seeing anyone," Sakura replied, having a hard time keeping the blood from rushing into her face. "Oh, but he is now." Forehead. "Ino, I know Naruto I know that there is no one he is interested in seeing. We are on the same team and I had lunch with him today. I think I know a thing or two about his personal life." Sakura was getting a little frustrated with Ino. But she wasn't ready to admit to herself that Naruto could have been with another woman after she left. "Are you jealous?" Forehead. Ino smirked as she could see this little bit of news was indeed having an effect on her friend's composure. "Why should I care if he likes someone else? Actually, it would be a relief if he did find someone else. Then he wouldn't keep asking me out on dates all the time." "I didn't know he still asked you out on dates." Anyway, the way she was looking at him sure didn't leave any room for the imagination as far as what her intentions were. "Ino, you are so full of it. I won't believe a word of it until I hear it from Naruto," she said snobbishly as she gathered up her things. If Ino was trying to get a reaction from her, it was starting to work because she felt like she needed to leave now before she tore apart the flower shop. "Tell you what, I'll just go find him right now and ask him. Then, I'll let you know if we hear wedding bells in Naruto's future, okay?" "Fine." Forehead. "Don't believe me. Hey, will I still see you tomorrow after work? I heard Tamari will be in town and I wanted to have some of the girls over while she's here. We can't let Shika monopolize her. Now can we?" Hi. I'll need a chance to go home and clean up first. I guess we're going to be working on surveillance techniques and that may require hiding in places I'd rather not be in. The more you talk about ANBU, the more I don't think I want to join." Later. Forehead. "Ya na, Ino Buddha." Sakura left the Yamanaka flower shop and headed home. She looked down at her bandaged hand and decided maybe she should pick up a new pair of gloves first. It always seemed that as soon as she broke in a pair of gloves that they would fall apart and she would have to get a new pair. Then, after a long hot shower, maybe she should go track down her wayward teammate. What Ino had said had rattled her a little bit. She trusted Naruto, but she didn't trust this sexy babe Ino had seen him with. Naruto. Sakura called as she opened up the door to his apartment. He hadn't answered the door when she knocked and he had given her a key back when they were teens just in case, and she wasn't afraid to use it. No one was home and it didn't look like he'd been back home since they got off work. In fact, his place was starting to look very much like a true bachelor's pad again. Yuck, she murmured as she looked around, her nose wrinkled in disgust. He usually kept it fairly clean for her sake, but this week had been crazy enough that apparently he hadn't had the energy to put away his cloths and even his dishes. She was about to leave when she turned around to see him standing right behind her, startling her. "Sakura-chan, I thought we were meeting after dinner," he asked. He seemed pleasantly surprised but a little embarrassed at the same time. He was hoping to find his floor before she came over. "Naruto, don't do that, you scared the crap out of me," she said, putting her hand on her heart which was now beating rather fast. "Are you sure you're in ANBU?" he teased. He shut the door before giving her a kiss on the lips. Haha, very funny. She obviously wasn't in the mood for being teased after her little talk with Ino. "Hey, is something wrong?" he said, looking at her for clues as to why she was so touchy. "I'll be fine in a minute when I pound you for making my heart leap into my throat," she said while pulling back a fist as if to hit him. "I love you too," he said as he walked around her and started clearing a path on the floor. "Care to sit and tell me what's going on with you?" He tossed his cloths into his bedroom and sat down on the couch. Sakura let out a sigh and sat down next to him. He pulled her into him and leaned back on the couch. She was so tired, having not slept since the day before yesterday, that she allowed herself to fall back into him. "Let me guess, did you see Ino this afternoon?" he asked. "How did you know?" "Well, I just had a feeling. That in your hand is bandaged and I know how you don't like to go to the hospital if you can avoid it," he said as he rested his cheek on the top of her head. "She told me she saw you with another woman," she finally confessed. "I trust you, Naruto, but she was talking like the woman was all over you and I guess I got a little upset." "Thank you for trusting me. Yes, I did walk past the flower shop today and I was with a woman, but it was all one-sided flirting, believe me," he said while running his hand up and down Sakura's arm. "Actually, it was Yakumo. You are a member, that girl that Kurenai-sensei worked with when we were genin. She ran into me at Ichiraku's after you left and she wanted to talk. To tell you the truth, I think she's got a crush on me, Datbeo. I knew Ino was full of it. I guess I'm not the only one who finds you sexy now, huh?" Sakura said, playing with the design on his jacket as her head rested on his shoulder. "But this sexy is all yours, believe it," he said before giving her a kiss on the top of her head. She just had to laugh at his childish phrase. Sakura knew he was all hers, she just had been taking it for granted until recently. Sakura lay in bed half asleep and not really wanting to get up. It was their day off and yesterday had been a hard one emotionally and physically. She was replaying memories of their battle, as it had made her think about things she would rather forget. Flashback. Their mission was against a group of missing ninja, a class that had escaped from the Hidden Mist Village's prison. Their ANBU team was able to locate them before they were very far within the borders of Fire Country. There had been 9 in all and it was apparent as soon as they found these rouges that there was a reason they were able to escape from a maximum security ninja prison. It seemed a genjutsu user had been the ringleader and the other 8 were a combination of sword and senbon users he had met while in prison. They were flying at top speed through the trees following their Taicho. He gave the motion to surround the mist ninja. Naruto made his signature kinjutsu hand sign and 4 copies of him appeared. Dropping down through the branches of the trees, he had quickly surrounded the last 5 Rouge ninja. All 5 Narutos were kicking, blocking and punching the mist cons faster than the normal human eye could follow. Sakura dropped down and took on a rather lanky-looking man who was at the front of the group as they spun to a stop. "Leaf Anbu huh?" he asked as his words dripped with disdain. Sakura said nothing, but started to build chakra up in her right fist, readying for her attack. She could see her Taicho take on two cons to her right and the tall red head went for the two on the left side of the leader. She could sense Senbon coming her direction only to have Naruto appear directly behind her, taking them in the back before disappearing in a puff of smoke. She returned her focus to the man in front of her as he suddenly gave her a sickening smile before fading before her eyes. She felt herself blinking her eyes trying to focus on his chakra signature, but she couldn't sense it anywhere. Through the haze, she could see two figures facing off against each other. Familiar images flashed before her eyes, images she dreaded, a future she wanted to avoid. Kai! She yelled out. Images disappeared as she was once again in front of the lanky man who had a dissatisfied expression on his face. I'm not that easy to fool. Shanaru. She cried her familiar battle cry as she pulled her fist back, releasing her full power into the abdomen of the man before her. Naruto soon had his five either knocked out or injured to the point they could no longer resist arrest. They had been a handful, but nothing he couldn't handle with his speed and strength. In fact, he only had to use one Rasengan since his other skills in wind manipulation and speed had greatly improved over the past 4 years. Their other two teammates made quick work of the other four. It wasn't long before the hunter Nin arrived to pick up their missing prisoners, only exchanging nods as the prisoners were transferred to their care. Sakura had killed the leader, so the remaining 8 cons were easily led away, at least the ones that could still walk, that is. As they made their way back towards Konoha, she could tell Naruto was a little worried about her as he kept looking back in her direction as they jumped through the treetops. They were always very quiet during the missions, but she knew he could read her body language enough to know that something was bothering her. But he knew better than to ask until they were at home and alone. End flashback. Sakura lay there on her bed staring at the ceiling. She knew in her head that genjutsu targeted the fears and insecurities of your own mind, but her heart still was having trouble getting over the images she had seen that looked much like a snapshot of the battle on the hospital roof. But the images of the two were as men and not boys. Still, she had seen them charging, Naruto with a resin shuriken and Sasuke with a Chidori-laced sword. What how? Nted her was that she had seen herself run to stop them and feared what would have happened had she not released the jutsu. They were unable to stop the first time. It would have been suicide for her to try and stop them a second time. She was still deep in thought when the sound of someone tapping on her window startled her. It was Naruto. He preferred to tap at her window as opposed to using the door this early in the morning. If he was up before her, it could only mean that something had been on his mind too. "Nay, Sakura-chan, open up," he said while sitting on the railing of her balcony that was next to her open bedroom window. "Naruto, what are you doing here at this hour?" she asked as she leaned up on her elbows, trying to forget the images in her mind. It was comforting to see him there before her eyes and very much alive. "I thought maybe you could use some company for breakfast before we go train," he said with a nervous smile. "You don't have anything to eat again, do you?" she said as she got out of bed and walked toward the window. "Meet me in the living room. I don't want footprints all over my bed like the ones you left last time." "Yes ma'am," he said rather flirtatiously, shooting her the smile he reserved for her. He couldn't help but notice how good she looked in just a tank top and pajama pants. Naruto left his gear on the balcony before coming into her small living room. Sakura only had enough room for a coffee table and couch in here since she had opted for a larger kitchen area over seating. She was either at Ino's or Naruto, so entertainment space hadn't been much of a need when she had chosen this place. Besides, her group of friends was large enough that if they all wanted to get together they usually just crashed at the Nara residence. Fortunately, Shikamaru's mom didn't seem to mind since the girls usually ended up being helpful in the kitchen where they could talk about the boys without worrying about them coming into the sacred kitchen of the Nara matron during the middle of a conversation. "So, what brings you here this early besides lack of food?" Sakura asked over her shoulder as she started to raid her fridge for breakfast food. Shish. Didn't have much food either since they had just come back from a mission. It looked like they would be having miso soup and rice for breakfast. He said, wrapping his arms around her waist as she set the food on the counter. Sakura let out a little gasp as he nuzzled her hair that fell against her neck. I've been worried about you since that last battle. There is something wrong when you're that quiet. It's nothing much. Just something I saw while I was caught in that genjutsu. I told you that yesterday, she said, trying to brush off his worry. But you didn't tell me what you saw. I have a feeling that it has something to do with us, he said as he started to move her hair away from her neck, giving him access so that he could place little kisses on it. Keep that up, Baka, and I'll forget what it was that I saw. She moaned as she leaned back into his warm body. Good, but I still want to know before you forget. Has anyone told you that you're stubborn? All the time. So, he said as he pulled her around so that she could face him. You remember your fight on the roof of the hospital? She said, looking up into his deep blue eyes. She noticed that his hair was getting long enough that she was going to have to cut it soon. Which one? Not with me. The first one. I see, he said, knowing now that she was thinking about his battle with Sasuke. So you saw me and Sasuke fighting again. You do realize there is a good chance of that happening again, right? I know. I think it was the thought of being weak and in the way that has been bugging me. I don't want you to risk your life if I'm not able to be right there by your side. She looked away from his gaze and he had to pull her back into his gaze with a knuckle under her chin. Instead of responding to her fears, he pulled her into a deep kiss. She dropped the package of wakame that she had still been holding and put her arms all the way around his muscular back. She fisted his shirt as he pulled her even closer, arousing her desire. They spent several minutes in their embrace before he pulled away. He took one of her hands and placed it over his rapidly beating heart. He placed her other hand on his flushed cheek. Sakura, can you feel that? Quote. She nodded her head in response. That is the power you have over me. Without your love for me I wouldn't be able to do what I do. You are the strength behind my motivation. Don't you dare fool yourself into believing that you are weaker in the way. I've never known anyone stronger or surer of herself than you. Sakura, look at me. I love you and I want you by my side no matter what. Understand? Quote. She nodded her response before giving him a teasing look. Have you been taking lessons from Tsunade and giving lectures? She teased. Sakura, I've been given so many lectures I think I've just absorbed it over the years, he said with a Cheshire cat grin. His stomach started to growl as he gazed into her jade green eyes. Hungry, she said, remembering she was trying to make breakfast at one point. Yes. The hot summer sun was blazing high overhead while 3 people could be seen on training ground number 3. Sakura had a devious look on her face as she slammed her fist into the ground in front of her. A small earthquake broke up the ground in an area about 20 meters in diameter. Naruto back-flipped out of the way as the ground that was once beneath his feet was turned into fissures. 3 inky snakes climbed up her legs and wrapped themselves around her body, locking her arms against it. I see your plan, she yelled before she became just a puff of smoke and a log in her place. Replacement jutsu. Sai, you're too slow, Naruto scolded. Gomen, said the art jutsu user as he walked up to join Naruto. Sakura had disappeared completely from sight, leaving her 2 training partners wondering what to do next. She's getting good at that chameleon jutsu, isn't she? Yes, she is. Cover me, he said as he took a deep breath and entered a meditative state. He looked up a moment later as his eyes had a red tint around the eyelids and his iris had turned yellow and frog-like. She's over there, behind that large boulder. She's not going to let you live long if you keep cheating like that, Sai commented. Sai, we're ninja. We're supposed to cheat. Get ready, he said, crouching into a defensive position, Sai standing behind him. They felt the earth rumble beneath them, but nothing happened for a second. Suddenly, the ground crumbled out from under their feet and they both fell about 8 meters down into a trap in the training grounds. Sakura walked up and peered over the edge of the large hole and just grinned at them maliciously. Sakura, when did you? Naruto stumbled out his questions. Kakashi-sensei mentioned a long time ago that this area was once used to teach trap jutsu and escape jutsu. After enough years of training I've learned how dense the ground is by the sound it makes when I hit it. I just let why. Oh, you think you were at a safe distance from me before I sprung the trap, she gleamed. Okay, you win. Now help us up, Naruto demanded. Nope. You're big strong ANBU, you figure it out, she taunted. As you wish, he said before she could feel a kunai at her back. When did you? She asked. It was now her turn to be surprised. At about the same time you did the replacement jutsu, he laughed. Now you owe us lunch. Okay. But we are not eating at Ichiraku's, she huffed. Sakura-chan, you're so mean, he whined. He and Sai both disappeared in a puff of smoke before reappearing next to Sakura. Naruto released the clone at that same moment. Let's go. I'm starving. As fun as lunch sounds, I'll see you two later, Sai said, turning to pick up his scroll that he had dropped when they had fallen into the hole. I've got a meeting to go to. I'll see you tomorrow at headquarters. Later Sai, Naruto said before Sai disappeared in a swirl of black ink. That was weird. Where is Sai off to? Sakura thought to herself. So are you ready for lunch? Sakura, now that we are alone, I'd much rather spend time with you, he flirted. Naruto, are you sure it's alright? How do we know that no one will see us? She asked. Naruto just pointed to his eye. Okay, great sage, how about you try to catch me first? She said before disappearing from his sight. No fair, Sakura-chan, he whined, taking off after her. Good thing he could sense her chakra or they were going to have a late lunch. Later that same afternoon, Kiba and Akamaru were walking down the street in the shopping district part of Konoha. They were headed towards the nicest jewelry store in the village when he saw Naruto exiting the building. Naruto. Kiba said, rather shocked to see Naruto coming out of a store like this. Man, what are you doing here? Naruto had been lost in his thoughts when he came out of the store and hadn't expected to see Kiba just then. Oh you know, he shrugged a response, trying to sound disinterested like Kakashi. Naruto. What could a guy like you be doing in a jewelry store like this without a good reason? Kiba's nose was good enough to sense that his friend smelled nervous. I could ask you the same thing, he replied. Kiba let out a nervous sigh as the rock by his shoe began to look rather interesting. Come on, I guess I'll show you. I have something to pick up. Oh, Ba was followed by Naruto as they went into the store. Akamaru, like any good nin dog, lay down outside the door. May I help you, sir? Said the store owner behind the counter. I'm here to pick up my order. I'm Inuzuka Kiba. Yes. I'll be right back, he said as he disappeared into the back room. So what did you get? Naruto asked. You'll see. Here it is, sir. There must be something in the air with you young men today. You are the second one today, the owner started, but Naruto shook his head, sending the owner the signal that he didn't want Kiba to know why he had been in there earlier. Kiba didn't seem to notice as the owner handed him his order. He opened the small square box to reveal a delicate-looking engagement ring. Naruto peered over his shoulder to look at the ring with wide eyes. Is that what I think it is, Kiba? Asked his wide-eyed friend. It's for Hinata. We've been dating for over a year now and her father finally gave his blessing, Kiba said with a blissful grin on his face. You dog you. Naruto said, not being able to hold back the intended pun. Kiba just growled as he closed the box and reached in his pocket for the remaining payment. When he had paid, the man he placed the ring in its box in his pocket and they left the store. So, you never did tell me why you were in there, Kiba said. Oh, I just thought I'd check out the necklaces. I haven't found a replacement since I broke the one Tsunade Bachan gave me and I thought I'd just poke my nose in there and see if they had anything similar in stock, Naruto lied, giving the excuse he had worked out in his head while Kiba was picking up his order. Oh, but I thought they didn't let you wear anything in the way of jewelry in ANBU. Man, they don't let you wear anything but what you are given in the uniform. There was more to it than just looks to that old one I wore, Naruto replied. Well, I've got places to go, so I'll see you around. Later, Naruto, Kiba called to his friend as he turned and headed toward home. Akamaru trotting faithfully behind. He had reservations to make and a girl to impress before he popped the question on their next day off together. Naruto turned and headed in the opposite direction that Kiba had gone. He stuck his hands into his pocket and fingered a small square box of his own. He was just glad the shop owner hadn't said anything more than he did before Kiba could pick up on why he was really there. With his hands deep in his pockets he walked down the street humming a nameless tune. They would be back at work tomorrow, so it would be a few days before he would be able to get Sakura alone. He let out a deep, contented sigh. One of these days he needed to drop by her parents' house too. He figured that would be harder than asking Sakura. Right. Now he was just planning on going home and celebrating this small step toward forever with a large bowl of ramen at Ichiraku's. The next day a young member of ANBU walked toward the Hokage's office after being summoned. He spent as little time here as possible unless he was assigned guard duty over one of the more secure areas in the building. He walked up to the double doors of the Hokage's office. Isen was let immediately in as his arrival was expected. "You wanted to see me, Hokage-sama," a young ANBU said as he entered the Hokage's office. He was wearing a plain white mask with an orange diamond over the left eye, and his messy blonde hair was all that might be used to identify him, apart from any other ANBU members, if he came across an enemy. "How are you adjusting to your new duties in ANBU?" The Hokage asked, more out of politeness than need for information. He sat at his desk with his good arm resting upon it. "Well enough. What did you need to see me about, sir?" "As direct as ever. As you know, you are the strongest weapon this village has. As it is, I cannot afford for you to go about making decisions that may affect the security and future of this village. As of right now, I am restricting your missions to the village. Do not under any circumstance go beyond half a day's journey into the surrounding forest of Konoha. Your captain and commander have both been informed of my decision. Do I make myself clear?" "Hi," he snapped his answer. "Good. I also understand that a boy your age is bound to be thinking about getting into a serious relationship. I want you to forge the possibility of such a relationship as of this moment. I have decided, and the daimyo agrees with me, that we need you to aid us in solidifying relations with other nations. That may require a political marriage. You have no free will regarding this matter. You will leave such decisions to myself or the daimyo. Be aware that any move you make affects the security of Konoha." Dismissed. The Hokage was straightforward and emotionless during the entire encounter with the member of ANBU, but the young man was obviously shaking with rage at the end of the Hokage's speech. He somehow managed to salute his Hokage and exit the room without causing a scene. As soon as he left the Hokage's office, he shot a fist through the wall opposite the double doors, his hand disappearing up to the elbow into the wooden wall. Two of his fellow ANBU stepped up beside him as a warning. He pulled his arm out of the freshly made hole and turned in defeat, slowly retreating down the hall before either of the guards said anything to him. Back inside the Hokage's office, a hooded figure stepped from the shadows and addressed the Hokage. "He took that rather well," the hooded man said as he appeared. "As to be expected. He is a member of ANBU now and he has learned his place. I don't expect him to like it. That is not a requirement of a loyal army. You will find in time even he will do what needs to be done in order to protect the village of Konoha," replied the Hokage. "Orochimaru-sama is very much enjoying this turn of events," he almost said in a hiss as a long purple tongue could be seen licking his lips out from under the hood. "It is only fair that I repay him for his services. After all, controlling the boy's power in repayment for my regeneration is only fair. It is not his power we want. But we want to keep him from interfering. He has disrupted our plans too many times. With Sasuke this close to the fire country, we can't afford anything getting in our way," replied his hooded conspirator. "The Uchiha is lost to us. But he was able to break the jutsu and I can't afford him being brought back by that boy only to find out Orochimaru is here and is very much alive and well, even if slightly altered. It may prove detrimental to our existence if the Uchiha tries to break the jutsu again. The boy's track record has not been good with the Uchiha, but this way he will not have the opportunity to make any new attempts. The way to control a strong shinobi is to control that which is precious to him. He has been given his freedom for too long." Tsunade had a soft spot for the boy to a fault. His precious people are a weakness of his. He would do anything to protect the people of this village, even if it means his own happiness and freedom. He will not cause you any trouble. As expected from the Rokudaime Hokage and longtime leader of Konohagakure's ANBU, hissed his creepy companion. Naruto was sitting on top of his favorite water tower looking up at the night sky. He was in full ANBU gear and they had been assigned to the night watch this month. Team 3 had been perfecting their Hensojutsu chameleon art in training, and this was the ultimate use for the jutsu, Obi in full view and yet remain unseen even by your fellow ninja. Now he knew why he never saw ANBU until they were calling him to appear before the Hokage. He and his fellow ANBU were everywhere, no one knew how many were really watching at any one time. This is where Naruto usually came when he had something on his mind. They had been given their choice as to which part of town they wanted to patrol, and for some reason he just felt more comfortable here. Konoha was quiet tonight. There wasn't going to be much to put in his report as his shift would be up in an hour. He could see Sakura from here. The plus about this jutsu is that you were still able to see your teammates if it was done just right. She was several blocks away on a tall building near the shopping district, her pink hair pulled back in a ponytail. It was blowing in the breeze, moving in and out of the translucency of the jutsu, and for some reason that made her seem even more striking. Naruto had caught himself daydreaming already a couple of times tonight, and fortunately no one could see. Get a hold of yourself, he inwardly scolded. He shook his head to clear his mind of the thoughts he was having and turned his head to look over the village. Such a peaceful night. Wish I could just enjoy it. His mind drifted to memories of how many times in the last few weeks he had to fight back the urges of his manho. When he was around the pink-haired kunoichi in public. He was sure she had no idea the power she had over him. Their love was mutual, but he had never wanted it to turn out this way. He could keep a secret if he needed to. But this had been a 4.5-year-long secret, and it was threatening to turn into an even longer one if Danzo had anything to do with it. The thought of a future with Sakura was almost enough to drive him mad. He hated that man for being the Hokage and not Tsunade. But still, it was now his duty to guard that man with his life and to do everything he was told to do. It was almost as hard to hide his anger toward Danzo as it was to hide his love for Sakura. Naruto wondered if it had been this hard for his father and mother. He knew that their marriage was a cray from most of the village just because the Yondaime wanted to protect his family from his enemies. It still hadn't made his childhood any easier to deal with, and he didn't want that for Sakura. It was times like these that he wished he could ask his father for help, but he had no idea if that was even possible. The one time he saw him may have been it as far as he knew, and he didn't want to risk going Kyuubi in order to find out. After their shift ended, Naruto walked towards his apartment alone. The blonde wanted to try and clear his mind before going to bed, and seeing Sakura might make that even harder. The rage he felt toward this whole situation made him feel like putting another hole into a wall, and he didn't want to do anything that might result in hurting Sakura in any way. Naruto stopped by the 24-hour convenience store and picked up a popsicle before turning toward home. He felt a little too old for such a treat, but the memories attached made the choice almost automatic for him. Sitting down on a bench not far from home, he unwrapped his treat, staring up at the night sky as it slowly began to glow to the east. "May I join you?" said a masculine voice next to him. It was Kakashi. "Kakashi-sensei, what are you doing at this time of day?" Naruto asked his former teacher. "Oh, you know. Actually, no I don't. Let me guess, an old lady needed help this morning." "No, but good guess," the retired ANBU member said as he sat down on the bench next to Naruto. "ANBU getting to you already, huh? Well, I'm defiantly learning some neat jutsu and all, but I hate being just a nameless tool. Sai already told me all about the changes. You are not the only one who is disgruntled. I have a feeling that if you give it some time it won't be like that forever." Kakashi gave Naruto a reassuring smile under his mask. Too bad Naruto could only see it in the way he crinkled his visible eye. "Kakashi-sensei, it's not only the everyday ANBU duties," he began. Naruto ran his hand through his hair as if taking pause to gather his thoughts a bit. "The Hokage ordered me to remain single in case he needs me to marry for political reasons. I also can't leave the village for a reason only the Hokage knows. I just feel so helpless and I can't," he let out a deep sigh. "I can't remember the last time I've felt like my life was so out of control." Naruto hung his head. The weight of these thoughts was evident in the slump of his broad shoulders. "There is more to it, isn't there? Does it have to do with a certain pink-haired kunoichi?" "How did you know?" asked the wide-eyed ANBU. "Naruto, I've known about you and Sakura since the very first day. You didn't think you could fool me, could you?" "Well, no. Hoped is more like it. Kakashi-sensei, it's not so much the whole secrecy surrounding our relationship. But there always seems to be something getting in the way. No matter what I try, it feels like fate is against us, plus all the stress from work isn't helping." he said, looking down at the popsicle as it began to melt. He took a moment to catch the drips while formulating what he was going to say next. Kakashi-sensei, Naruto said after a moment of silence, since you already know. I want to show you something. He pulled a small box out of his pocket and handed it to Kakashi. Is this what I think it is, Naruto? Kakashi said as he opened it, revealing a silver ring with a deeply set solitary diamond in it. Yeah, Naruto said, hanging his head again. I had it specially ordered so that she could wear it into battle if need be and not worry about it breaking if she hit something. But, he trailed off, not finishing his final thought. Naruto, he said, causing the blonde to finally look him in the eye, I wouldn't worry about the Hokage. Things are bound to change and I don't think he'll be able to hold that order over you for much longer. I think you'll know when the time is right to ask her. But, I just can't manage to ask her to even wait. For me, assuming something could be done about the Hokage. It's not only that, but I haven't fulfilled my promise to bring Sasuke back. I know that sounds silly, but it just doesn't feel right. Did you know she even released me from that promise 4 years ago? Kakashi nodded his response before Naruto continued. I made that same promise to myself, not just for Sakura's sake, but for Sasuke's. Well, it makes sense why she released the promise if you think about why she made you make it in the first place. I wouldn't worry about Sasuke either if I were you. There is a reason he's been hard to track lately and it may be a very long time before we even hear about where he is hiding. You've got bigger things to deal with right now. Kakashi-sensei, what could be bigger than a direct order from the Hokage? He said, taking back the box from Kakashi and placing it in his pocket. Think about it, I'm sure it will come to you. Let's just say there is a reason you are carrying that box around with you at all times. He said, giving him a hidden smile. He stood up and ruffled Naruto's messy blonde locks. Naruto grimaced at this reminder that to Kakashi he was still just a kid. Kakashi bid him farewell and turned to go down the road. Naruto could see him pull out one of his infamous books and he just let out a little chuckle at the sight of his sensei with his nose forever in a book. If only life turned out like it did in those stories. Naruto had finally gotten around to reading one and it was a lot more interesting than it had been the first time he picked one up 7 years ago. It was still not as good as The Gutsy Ninja, but now that he was older he could see why Kakashi spent so much time reading them. Now, as long as Sai didn't pick up reading Jiraiya's books they would be alright. Just the thought of him taking those books as gospel and using them on the local women gave him a shiver down his spine. The sun was just starting to peek over the buildings when Naruto finally made his way home. He opened the door and took off his boots. He could sense a familiar chakra signature in the room, but he hadn't expected to talk to her this morning. He walked to the couch to sit down next to her as she sat watching him in silence. Maybe he shouldn't have given her a key, not that it made any difference. She was much better at the unlocking jutsu than he was anyway. You left work before I could talk to you. Is everything alright? Sakura asked as he sat down. I just had a lot on my mind this morning. I didn't mean to make you worry, he said as he laid down, placing his head in her lap. Well, you did, Baka. If I had half a mind to I'd hit you clear across the village. Instead she just brushed some of his long bangs away so that she could get a better look at his face. They remained this way in silence for a while. Sakura just continued to play with his hair until his stomach let out an audible growl demanding that he deal with the hunger he had been ignoring. Popsicles don't make good breakfast. Have you had breakfast yet? He said, getting up. She followed him into the kitchen as he started to make a quick breakfast of omelets and bacon. The Pinkett pulled 2 teacups out of the cupboard and started to heat some water in the tea kettle while he scrambled some eggs in a bowl. She knew whatever it was that was bothering him must be big if he was avoiding even looking in her direction. Sakura continued to watch him in silence while he made breakfast using whatever he had in the fridge at the moment. She wasn't too picky about what she had in her omelette as long as she didn't have to make breakfast this morning. His shoulders slumped as he cut some onion and pepper to put in the egg mixture. Whatever it was that was bothering him he wasn't emptying to hide it behind that famous smile of his. Actually, she should have felt honored to see the side he never showed to anyone else. Naruto had long ago stopped putting up the brave front for her that he put up for everyone else. However, she didn't feel honored at the sight of the distraught man before her. Sakura walked up to him and put a hand on his back between his shoulder blades. What is it? You know you can tell me anything. The blonde stopped what he was doing and turned to look at her in the eyes. I can't tell you. Not yet anyway. Please believe me when I say that you'll find out soon. Just give me some time, okay? Naruto's eyes plead with her as he spoke. They had almost turned a midnight blue as he gazed into her jade green eyes. Okay, just don't make me beat it out of you, she said, giving him a warm smile. A beating from you would be a blessing compared to what I've got on my mind right now, he said, causing a confused look to appear on her face. I know I'm just a baka. But can we just be together in silence today? Okay, she said, standing up on tiptoe to give him a kiss on the lips. He pulled her close and deepened the kiss before the tea kettle started it. Chorus and made them come back to reality. Naruto turned back to his cutting board, cursing at their situation under his breath, as Sakura proceeded to make them tea. She was clueless as to what was tea. Tormenting him, and for the moment that was the way he wanted it. Once breakfast was ready, they ate in silence, just like Naruto had requested. At first Sakura wasn't sure he'd be able to handle the silence of ANBU. But he seemed deep enough in thought that it almost seemed second nature to him at that moment. It made her miss the loud Naruto of just a few years ago. She was trying to think of a way to cheer him up when he got up to put his dishes in the sink. I'm going to go to bed. Feel free to stay as long as you like, he said as he walked toward her and gave her a kiss on the forehead before silently making his way to the bedroom. Moments later, she put her own dishes away and followed him to the bedroom. He had already changed into shorts and a t-shirt and was in bed, and she thought he had already fallen asleep. She stood next to the bed for a moment and watched him sleep. Sakura couldn't resist her urge and finally gave into it, giving him a tender kiss on his slightly open mouth. The blonde reacted more than she was expecting as he reached up and grabbed her arms, bringing her in for a deeper kiss. Her eyes grew big out of surprise before she closed them and returned the kiss. Sakura climbed onto the bed and lay down next to him while still in his embrace. She could tell Naruto was fighting with some strong emotions with how desperate his kisses felt on first her lips then her neck. She unconsciously let out soft moans in pleasure as his desire for her started to ignite her own desires for him. Out of habit she began to stroke his whiskers, making him moan with pleasure. Sakura then ran her fingers into his hair and pulled his head closer to her body as she rolled onto her back, bringing him almost on top of her. She looked down into his face at the same moment he looked into hers, and she was surprised to see that his eyes were crimson. She gasped, causing him to back off. He sat there in shock as he looked down at his hands, which had developed some rather long claw-like fingernails. He could also feel that his canines had gotten sharper as well. I'm sorry, Sakura, maybe we should stop, he said as his expression was a mixture of embarrassment and fear. Hee-haw. Didn't expected his rage and the desire for her that he was feeling to go as far as to pull out some of the fox's chakra. He sat up on the edge of the bed looking dejected. Naruto, what is it? We've never had this problem before. She sat up on her knees next to him as he grasped his hair with both hands. Sakura, his voice faltered, maybe now just isn't a good time. You know I want you and I love you with all my heart. It's just that I've got a lot of things on my mind and I don't know what will happen if I lose control. You know I'd never hurt you, but this is new for me too and I just don't want to mess up. He looked up into her eyes, hurt and fear were evident in his eyes as he brushed some of her bangs behind her ear. She was glad to see that they had returned to their normal blue. Okay, she said as she pulled his hand towards her lips to give it a kiss. But you'd better tell me what's going on soon before you explode, literally. He let out a nervous laugh and Sakura was glad that whatever it was hadn't completely taken away his sense of humor. She pulled his face towards her for one last passionate kiss before she climbed off the bed and turned to leave. I love you, Uzumaki Naruto. I'll be at home if you change your mind about telling me. I love you too, Haruno Sakura. Don't worry, you'll be the first one I tell, he said as he tried to hide his frustration and pain behind a smile. Sakura blew him a kiss and walked out the door, leaving him alone to his thoughts. What the hell was that? I've never lost control like that before. He flopped down on his mattress and stared at the ceiling. He unconsciously gripped at the seal on his stomach with his left hand as he ran his right hand through his hair. His thoughts were making it harder to fall asleep the second time around. Why was it that everyone that knew anything about the seal was gone? He knew that strong emotions made him pull out the fox's chakra, but was it because of his desire for Sakura that did it this time? Was it the stress he was feeling from being in ANBU's version of boot camp? Was it his frustration over not having found Sasuke yet? It most defiantly had something to do with the Hokage's order. How he wished Ero Sennin was here so that he could ask him. Of course, the pervy old man probably wouldn't have gotten past the fact that Naruto had been making out with Sakura when it happened. He was pretty sure that Gaara had never gotten into a relationship before he lost the one tail. It was a dead end to even ask him. Naruto fitfully tossed and turned trying to understand his LD until finally sleep overtook him as he lay there sprawled on his bed. He never even bothered to pull the covers back up over himself. Sakura was walking down the street on a rather windy evening. The late summer winds were promising a storm at any minute as she quickened her pace hoping to arrive at her destination before the rain began to fall. It was her day off and she was headed to an evening with her girlfriends over at Ino's apartment. Ino had been trying to get all of them to come over since Tamari came back to town and it finally worked out with no one on a mission today. Of course, the weather had decided not to cooperate, so they were more than likely going to spend the evening talking about boys and watching romance movies. Knowing Ino, she probably was going to bust out the beauty products and maybe Sakura would get a chance to have her toes painted for one day. No fingernail polish allowed in ANBU, so she would have to take it off later, but it was still fun to sit around Ino's apartment and talk while she kept her hands busy. It wasn't long before she found herself in front of Ino's door. She loved the woman to death, being her best friend and all, but some days she found it harder to deal with the loud blonde than others. After the way Naruto had been acting, today felt like it could be one of those days. She had picked up on his attitude and it hadn't helped he still hadn't reveled to her what was going on. She was trying not to ponder this when Ino opened the door and let her in. Tenten and Tamari were already sitting on the couch where Tenten was catching Tamari up on all the latest news in Konoha. The weapons mistress talked a lot about Neji did this and Neji did that, but Tamari only rolled her eyes whenever Tenten mentioned her stoic teammate. Naturally, Tenten denied having any feelings for the Hyuga prodigy. Sakura, you're just in time. I've got hot water if you want tea, or I have hot chocolate, Ino said. Sakura greeted the others in passing as Ino practically dragged her by the arm into the kitchen. I'll take some hot chocolate, Sakura replied once they entered Ino's kitchen, which was closed off from the living room. She was a little confused as to why Ino had dragged her in here. Ino pulled down a mug for Sakura before turning around with a serious look on her face. So, what's this I hear about you and the #1 surprising ninja? Are you two dating? Ino quizzed her best friend. Ino, someone has been filling your head with lies. Why would I want to date Naruto? Sakura denied. One of my sources told me they've been spending a lot of time together outside of ANBU, Ino said as she handed Sakura a mug of the chocolatey drink. Sakura blew on her drink before replying, giving herself time to think up a good response. Ino, Naruto is my best friend, aside from you. I mean, look at how much time I spend with you and people don't think it's weird, Sakura said, throwing in a joke to cover the white lie. Besides, we are in ANBU together and sometimes it's just easier to talk to someone else who knows what you're going through. Yes, but forehead, I'm not a guy. You spend as much time with a guy as you do me and people are bound to notice. Everyone knows he's had a crush on you since the academy. Ino turned around and started to make herself a cup of tea while she talked. Also, neither of you seem to want to date other people. ANBU can't be so busy that you can't find time to date. Tell you what, I'll see if I can dig up any single guys for you and maybe we can do a little double dating sometime. I take it your relationship with Mitsuhiro is going well, Sakura said, pushing the conversation away from her and Naruto. Ino let out a deeply happy sigh before she spoke. He is such a gentleman. He's still a little clueless when I talk about missions, but that's to be expected of any civilian. We try not to talk about flower shop stuff on dates, but he's doing wonders with the shop and it's hard not to fall into that topic. Before Sakura could reply to Ino's musings about her latest boyfriend, there was a knock at the door. Ino rushed to the door and opened it to reveal that it was Hina. Tahu was practically jumping up and down with excitement. Hinata, you look like you've had a good day. Come on in, Ino said as she let the Hyuga heiress into her living room. Hello Ino. Hi Tenten, Sakura, Tamari, said the shy young woman. Okay, spill it, what's going on, Tamari said, not wasting any time. Hinata's face became bright red at Tamari's directness, but managed to stutter out an answer. KK Kiba-kun asked me to marry him. She held up her left hand for all to see and they all gathered around to inspect the engagement ring he had given her. You said yes obviously, Ino teased. Hi, she stuttered in response. Oh, Hinata, I'm so happy for you, Sakura said. The rest of the girls offered their congratulations as they all started in on a conversation about how he proposed. And what Hinata and Kiba were planning for the wedding, which wasn't much at this point since he had asked her the evening before. When the excitement about Hinata's engagement died down a little, Ino turned to Tamari. So, are you going to tell them your news or should I? I'll tell them. It will be obvious before too long anyway. I'm pregnant. Shikamaru and I are going to have a baby, she sighed. Almost sounding like this was an everyday bit of news. Don't sound so blasé about it, Tamari, that's wonderful news, Tenten said. Well, it was not how we had planned on doing this. I still haven't told my brother. The cage yet, and I don't know if the baby and I will live here with Shikamaru or even if I'm going to keep doing what I'm doing now as the representative of Suna. Funny, Old think Shikamaru had it all planned out, Ino said with a laugh. He did. He just didn't plan on things not going according to plan, Tamari said, actually blushing. Don't tell me, I really don't want to know how far he planned things. Ino said, actually trying not to think of her teammate in that way. The rest of the girls just laughed at Ino since they had been cringing at thoughts along the same lines. So are you and Shika going to get married? Sakura said, asking the question that was on all their minds. Maybe. I mean, we had talked about it before all this happened, but he had said it was for me to decide whether I wanted to live in Konoha or just leave it as a casual relationship. You mean friends who sleep together? Ino offered. Yay, something like that. His attitude is completely different towards us since I told him about the baby. I think he's actually excited to be a dad. He's such a lazy crybaby that I'm surprised by how he's acting now. I am still having a hard time picturing Shika as a dad. He's great with Kurenai's son and all, but I don't know, I just can't picture him raising a kid. Sorry Tamari, Ino said, obviously struggling with the mental picture of Shikamaru with a baby. Ino, I don't know about you, but I can't picture any of the guys changing diapers and being dutiful fathers. The thought of Lee even going near a baby scares me, laughed Tenten. That would bring a new definition to the springtime of youth, that's for sure, Sakura said, laughing so hard she started to cry. It took a while for the laughter to die down before any of them could talk after that. They spent the rest of the evening laughing about men and babies and exchanging funny guy stories. Lucky for Sakura, Tenten wasn't in an active relationship, so she didn't fail quite so awkward not talking about Naruto in that frame of reference. Tenten was so head over heels for Neji though, the kunoichi had to laugh at her friend's obvious attraction for the man. Sakura walked home well past midnight as the wind whipped around the village of Konoha. She was exhausted from having such a good time with her fellow kunoichi. It would be nice to do that more often, but Hinata getting married and Tamari having a baby, there was a good chance that these evenings were going to be more and more infrequent. Sakura let out a sigh as she walked toward her apartment. Small pang of regret stabbed at her happiness as she pulled out her keys to unlock her door. Truth be told, she had a hard time not telling her friends about her and Naruto and trying to keep Ino from finding out about them was getting harder every time Ino tried to set her up on a date. Not that she wanted to go on a double date with Ino. Besides, her rival was a renowned attention hog and she was probably worse when there was a man in the picture. Sakura opened the door and removed her knee-high boots before making her way to the bathroom. She needed a long hot bath before going to bed and nothing was going to keep her from it. Sakura removed her everyday cloths and tossed them in the cloths hamper before turning the water on. Once the tub was full of hot, steamy water, she waded in and slowly sat down. She hadn't realized how tired she really was or how tight her muscles had been until she let herself relax completely as she slid deeper into the bath. Leaning her head back against the edge, she let her mind drift through the various things that had been on her mind lately, trying her hardest not to truly think about anything. Thoughts about her friends all being at some level of AR. Relationship didn't seem to want to leave her thoughts. Tenten with a crush, Ino with a boyfriend, Hinata with a fiancé, and Temari pregnant. She also couldn't get Naruto's pained expression out of her mind. Sakura brought a hand up to her face and realized she had been weeping silently. The frustration she had been burying for the past few months finally surfaced and she just let it all flow out as she sat there alone in the bathroom. So did you have a good time with the girls last night? Her blonde teammate asked her the next afternoon on their way to work. He was obviously dealing better with whatever had been bothering him the other day, even if he hadn't told her what it was yet. Let's just say that we had fun laughing at your guy's expense, she giggled remembering what all they talked about the previous evening. She felt much better after a good cry and a good night's sleep. I'm not surprised, he said with a roll of his eyes. So, how are all the girls? Everyone is good more or less. Let's see. What can I tell you that won't make you blush? He gave her a confused look as she mentally sorted through what all they talked about last night. Hinata and Kiba are engaged, Temari and Shikamaru are having a baby. Tenten doesn't realize she's in love with Neji, although don't tell anyone I said that, and Lee would just be scary as a dad, she said trying not to laugh at the image that went along with that last statement. Naruto just laughed at a mental image of Lee and some poor child as well. Hate to tell you Sakura, but I already knew all of that, well except the part about Tenten. Don't worry. I won't tell Neji. I think he might have a heart attack if he knew she thought of him that way. Well, you're no fun. How did you know about Hinata and Temari before I did? She said punching him in the shoulder, a pout on her lips. Well, Kiba showed me the ring he got Hinata about a week ago. I've never seen Dog Boy so nervous in my life, he said rubbing the bruise she had just made. And let me guess, Shikamaru told you about the baby. Actually I heard it from Choji. Shikamaru was still in shock when I ran into them watching clouds on Shikamaru's favorite hill. Naruto laughed at the memory of the pale shadow user as he was trying to process his next move with Temari. Well, I'm sure you'll have fun rubbing that little bit of information in his face later on. Actually, I kind of feel sorry for those two. I don't think Gaara is going to be too happy when he finds out all of Konoha knows about his sister sleeping with Shikamaru, much less being pregnant with his child before he did. Datbeo, he cringed. Gaara's a great guy, but I'm planning on staying far away from Shikamaru just in case until after she tells her brothers the news. I don't think Temari would let Gaara kill Shikamaru. Besides, they are the only two that can put up with each other. I for one have no interest in dating that slacker, Sakura laughed. She was just glad the Ezekage no longer had Shaku within him or Shikamaru's days may be numbered. Haha, very funny, he retorted. He hated it when she did that. Once they got to ANBU headquarters, they changed into their uniforms and masks and reported to their Taicho to receive that day's mission. Their team was still on night watch, but their Taicho had them training on different jutsus for a couple of hours before their watch started. Sakura had been getting very dangerous with her Kyushojutsu Vital Point art, and Gokui Atemi Sakatsu Hozukai Secret Killing Strikes art. Naruto assumed that it had to do with her medical knowledge. He was faster than she was, but she had even managed to immobilize him during their last training session. He didn't want to admit it, but Sakura was a natural ANBU member. She picked up on all the jutsu 10 times faster than he did and she was good at it the first time she tried it. It just made it all the more obvious that she was the heaven in their relationship and he was the earth. They met with their team leader in the training grounds as was their habit before their masked Taicho began to speak. Today we are going to work on elemental training, their Taicho began. Nice. Finally something I'm good at, Naruto thought to himself. Naruto. Hope you are enjoying your day off. Tsunade wants me to work at the hospital during the day this week. Taicho knows, so I'll probably only get to see you on the weekend. I'm going to go to the club tonight with Ino and the girls to celebrate Hinata and Temari's news. I think they are bringing the guys. It would be fun if you could join us. Might even be a few fangirls to keep you company. I'll see you when I see you. Shanaru. Sakura wrote on a piece of note paper and stuck it to Naruto's door. She was glad she had the week off from ANBU. But she would miss not being able to see her favorite knucklehead. It was also going to mess up her sleep schedule, not that all the years of training didn't help her to deal with that part. Tsunade wanted her to help train some of the new medics this week. Sakura also had a feeling that Tsunade had some medical jutsu she wanted Sakura to learn, and it promised to be a very long week indeed. Her Shiso was a renowned slave driver, and without her Hokage duties she was even more focused on making her hospital staff the best of the 5 elemental nations. Sakura wondered if part of it was driven by the ever-present threat of war with the other nations since Danzo became Hokage. Her first stop before going home was the market. She had been living off rice and donburi way too much over the last few weeks, and she needed something new in her pantry. The thought of instant ramen made her wrinkle up her nose. She had no idea how Naruto could practically live off that stuff. Maybe she could grab some bonito dried tuna and umeboshi salted plums for onigiri stuffed rice balls this week. She also needed to grab some milk if Naruto was planning on raiding her fridge again. He always seemed to know when she went to the store because her milk supply never lasted as long as she would like. Sakura wandered down the market district, filling her bag with the needed groceries before heading home. At her last stop she picked up some sake and turned to go down the street. "Picking up some bad habits from Tsunade?" asked a tall man behind her. Sakura turned around to find Sai. "Sai, if you're referring to the sake, it's for cooking. I was going to make miso cucumber pickles for my lunches. If you're interested, I'll bring some extra next time we work together," Sakura said, trying to be polite to her teammate. "No thanks. Last time I ate your mud balls I couldn't stand the thought of food for a week," he said, falling in step with her as they walked down the street. "So I hear you escaped work for a week. How did you manage that? Tsunade wants me at the hospital this week, and don't call my soldier pills mud balls. I just hadn't thought to taste them before I gave them to Naruto. Besides, he loves my soldier pills," she said with a slight smirk. "Naruto will eat anything labeled food, so that doesn't say much," Sai laughed. He had been working more and more on his facial expressions lately, and they were actually starting to look more natural. "He still won't eat apples," Sakura giggled. He had refused to eat any since she had force-fed him one while in the hospital several years ago. "So, how's life as a single man again?" Sakura asked. She really didn't know what other topic to talk about at the moment. "It's okay. I get to do whatever I want, and they've been able to work on some of the paintings that have been sitting unfinished for the past several months. I still haven't forgotten that one I promised you when you got your apartment. Sai, you promised me that painting 2 years ago. That's okay. We've all been busy, so I won't hold that against you. Thanks. So I hear that there is a big gathering tonight to celebrate Shikamaru's last few days before his execution by the cage," he said with a straight face. "Are you going?" "I was planning on it. Ino's going to bring her new boyfriend along. Are you sure it wouldn't feel too weird seeing them together?" "Sakura, I've had a lot of emotional training. Don't worry about it," he replied. "Anyway, I was wondering if you were interested in going with me." "Me?" she said in surprise. "No offense, but I've never thought of you in that way. That's why I wanted to ask you." "Sakura, I'm not interested in dating anyone right now, and you don't appear to be either. I was just hoping that if we went together it would just even out the male to female ratio," he said rather matter-of-factly, using logic that only made sense coming from Sai. "I understand where you're coming from, but I don't see how that would make it even. Well, Naruto and Choji seem to have their share of fangirls, and since I don't have any it will even it out," he replied. "Fine, you talked me into it. I'll meet you out in front of the club at 10. How does that sound?" "Sounds like a plan. See you at 10, ugly," he said, waving as he turned to go toward his apartment. "Don't call me ugly, pale face," she yelled down the street after him. Now this could make the evening interesting. She mentally laughed at the gossip this was going to start, especially after she told Ino she had zero interest in going on a date with Sai. Since they were just going as friends, she was pretty sure Naruto wouldn't react too much. At least she hoped he wouldn't react. It wasn't like he didn't spend time with his fan club when they went out or anything. "Why does life always have to be so complicated?" she said out loud as she now stood in front of her apartment door. "Then we wouldn't be able to practice our camouflage jutsu. Naruto said, walking up to her unexpectedly. I got your note. I'm going to have to make you wear a bell or something, Baka, she said after she had recovered from him sneaking up on her. Abe, she needed to work on honing her chakra sensing skills. Hey, it's the one jutsu I'm better at than you are. If I can sneak up on you, I know I can sneak up on just about anyone, he said with a shrug. So what's adding to your complicated life now? Sai just asked me if I would go with him tonight to the club, she said, trying to act nonchalant as she opened the door and walked into her apartment. Sai. Nay, Sakura-chan, I thought you didn't want to play that game, he said rather calmly as he started to help her put groceries away. I don't, and what are you acting so calm about? She said, taking some vegetables out of a bag and setting them on her counter so that she could clean them before putting them away. Sakura-chan, I think Sai knows more than he lets on, he said as he pulled out a glass and poured himself some milk. What makes you say that? She turned around to face him as she leaned back against the counter. Hey, I'm a ninja too, remember? Sometimes there are things you just sense before you understand why you sense it. Okay, Ninja-sama, but I still don't understand why you are so calm. I just had a long talk with Tsunade Bachan. She thinks it might be a good idea for us to take a break for a while, he said before taking a drink from his glass. He failed to notice Sakura suddenly looking rather pale. What? Sakura couldn't hide the shock and the pain in her heart at what that kind of statement implied. Whoa, not that kind of break, he said, holding his hands up in defense, suddenly realizing his mistake too late. It's just until we can figure out why I'm pulling out Kyuubi chakra during makeout sessions. Don't worry, I didn't tell her any of your secret moves. Sakura still hadn't recovered from her first reaction as tears had already started to pool in her eyes. Naruto walked toward her and put his arms around her. She obviously wasn't finding any of his attempts at joking about her secret moves very funny, and she started to cry in his embrace. I'm sorry I said it that way. Sakura no Hana. Can you forgive a baka like me? She nodded her response, but she wasn't recovered enough yet to stop the flow of tears. Bachan is worried that T might be related to stress, and adding intense emotions on top of it may be what's causing my reaction. I actually feel much better since we talked, but she doesn't trust me enough to think that a little talk will cure it. I'm sorry. I just need to figure this out so that I don't end up hurting you. Sakura sniffed back the last of her tears and whipped them on his jacket. He just laughed and stroked her long, pink hair. Not funny. Baka, she said as she poked him in the ribs with a chakra-loaded finger. He somehow managed to only cringe this time around. It wasn't like it was the first time she had bruised his ribs like that or anything. I'm sorry, Naruto, she said, pulling away from him and turning to lean on the counter behind her. It's okay. You didn't break anything, he said, thinking she meant his ribs. Not that, she snapped. I think I'm just feeling a little left behind with Hinata getting married and Temari having a baby. Even Ino acts like this guy might actually be the one. I just want to go up to the top of the Hokage monument and scream, I'm in love with Uzumaki Naruto, but I can't. Sakura, we talked about this, his voice firmly reminding her that it was a closed topic. Sakura turned around to face him, her expression letting him know that to her it was not a closed topic. Naruto, I'm sick of hiding. I just want a normal life, at least as normal a life that a ninja can have. I want to show off my boyfriend. I want to stick it in the Hokage's face that he can't control everything. I want to be able to walk up to you in the middle of the street and kiss you right on the mouth for all the world to see. I want the home and the children. I even want to be able to lose control with you and not worry about you going Kyuubi on me. She was starting to punch him at this point out of frustration, and he stepped into her and grabbed her wrists. He wasn't quite sure how to deal with Sakura like this. Tears were bad enough, but she had lost control and he did. Didn't know what to do but keep her from doing her best to injure him, which he knew she could do easily. Sakura, I know how you feel, but you need to calm down, he said firmly. You obviously don't know how I feel. Why won't you let me tell the world how much I love you? She said, glaring at him and trying to free her wrists from his firm grasp. Their secrecy had been a mutual decision, and she didn't know why she was placing all the blame on Naruto in this moment. Sakura, my parents went through the same thing. It's because I'm the Jinchuriki, the Yondaime's son, and I just want to protect you. He said, pulling her into a hug so that he could try to calm her down and keep those dangerous hands under control. She managed to free herself from his hold on her and he wasn't sure if he should run now or try to get a hold of her again. Naruto, what are you afraid of? There is something that you are not telling me and you are the one that always says you don't want anything between us. Our green eyes were sharp and brilliant with rage and they pierced deep into his soul. I told you, Sakura. There are some things I need to take care of before that can happen. Just give me some time, he began. But she was in no mood to hear excuses. What? Like Sasuke. He could light himself on fire with Amaterasu for all I care. She was starting to tear up again and Naruto couldn't stand to see her looking like this. Sakura, please. Just calm down before you say something we'll both regret, he pleaded. Fine. Be that way. Get out before I make a new door with you. She screamed as she turned and ran into the bedroom, slamming the door behind her, almost taking it off its hinges. Naruto was stunned at what had just happened and he slowly turned and walked out the door, closing it quietly behind him. Maybe going to the club tonight is not a good idea, at least not until Sakura calms down. What have I done? Oh, Kami-sama, what have I done? She cried silently on her bed as she heard the door close in the next room. She could hear him walk down the hall with heavy footfalls. Naruto was obviously not trying to mask his presence now as he walked away from her door. She hadn't meant to unload on him like that, but once she started it felt like inner Sakura had taken control and she was watching it all happen from the sidelines. She cried on her bed for what seemed like hours before. Rishi sat up and wiped the tears from her cheeks. She looked at the pile of tissues that sat next to her on the bed and let out a shaky sigh. Cleaning up her pile she moved toward the bathroom to deposit her load and inspect her swollen eyes. She didn't understand how her life had unraveled so fast in one afternoon. She knew Naruto would be hurt, but he would bounce back like always. At least she hoped that he would bounce back. She had been furious at their situation, but she hadn't meant to take it all out on him. He was her strength and the love of her life. Not only did she manage to lay into him like that, but she was feeling very ashamed of all that she had said. Sure, it was all true, maybe not in the angry way that she had said it, but it was true. She was jealous of her friends and now she had just managed to hurt her very best friend. She splashed some cold water on her face hoping it would calm the redness around her swollen eyes. She knew a few secrets to get rid of the swelling. But right now it felt like her face deserved a little punishment. Her next destination was her kitchen where she saw the remnants of the glass of milk he had left on the counter. The sight of this caused tears to surface once more. But she managed to choke them back before they started to fall. She had been ready to tease him for his constant raiding of her refrigerator before he had hit her with that comment. It wasn't such a big deal now as she dumped out the rest of the milk into the sink. She still had cucumbers sitting on the counter, so she mechanically started to make her miso pickles. She needed a mindless activity to keep her hands busy at the moment, and this seemed like something she could handle. Sakura was getting ready for bed when she heard a knock at the door. She was pretty sure that Naruto would be avoiding her for at least a week unless she made the first move, so she had no idea who would be stopping by at this hour. Clad in only her pajamas when she went to the door, opening it up to see that it was Sai. Sai, what are you? Crap. I forgot. I'm so sorry, she apologized. I like your outfit tonight. Is that a new style? He said nonchalantly. No, they're my pajamas. I had a rough afternoon and completely forgot about tonight. I'm sorry, Sai, but I don't think I can go, she said, making excuses. I'd say that was okay and leave, but both Tamari and Ino oughtn't my life if I didn't come over and pick you up. I'll wait until you get something a little more club appropriate on, he said, shutting the door so that she wouldn't have time to argue. Fine, but don't expect me to have a good time, she thought as she shook her head and walked back toward her bedroom. She changed into a more appropriate outfit and joined Sai out on the landing after only 5 minutes of fixing up her appearance in the bathroom. She still had wet hair, but that didn't seem to matter tonight. She felt terrible and she didn't care who knew. So, I'm going to assume that you don't want to talk about your afternoon with me, so how about this windy weather we are having? He said, trying to strike up a conversation. Sai, Thank you for trying to be a gentleman, but I'm not really in the mood for small talk. I'll warn you right now that this will probably be the worst date you've ever had, she said, trying to hide her face with her long bangs. She had pulled the rest of it back in a loose braid. But no matter how she did her hair, she always ended up with her long bangs falling out on either side of her face. That's okay, I wasn't expecting much anyway. You will be glad to hear that Naruto isn't there. Wait, how did you? She started but couldn't find the words to finish. Sakura, I'm not as clueless as you think I am. You two have been sending unrequited signals for years. Although I don't think either of you realize you're doing it. I would say I'm the only one who notices them, but I can't guarantee that. Don't worry, I don't think Ino knows. She's always too busy with her own love life to notice, he said, giving that fake smile of his. I can't promise you a good time tonight, but I am here if you ever decide you need someone to talk to. Sigh, I do. Know how you ended up turning out to be so nice, Sakura said, giving him the best smile she could manage. Thank you, I think, he said as they headed off to a night of loud music, good friends, and emotional masks. A lone figure watched over Konoha as he sat on top of the Yondaime's head of the Hokage monument. Eyes filled with pain as he watched the pink-haired Kunoichi walk down the stray with his friend on their way to the club. Sakura didn't know why she was doing this. This was an act about as desperate as falling off a cliff and grabbing onto the fine roots from the trees that air growing above, hoping that they would hold weight. She sealed the note with a Fuin no Jutsu that he had shared with her what seemed like a lifetime ago. It was a Fuin no Jutsu that could only be released by a Sharingan user, and she had only used it a couple of times since then with Kakashi. There had been rumors of a three-man team that was crossing through the Wave Country picking up dangerous missions for a low fee. The rumor was that a raven-haired man who summoned snakes led them, and the only one who fit that description was Sasuke. She was sending the note via Tazuna and Inari, hoping that they might be able to deliver it somehow. Sakura was thinking about how she still hadn't seen Naruto since they had that fight. In fact, she had not been able to track him down at all during the last week. Working with Tsunade hadn't left much time for her to look either. The Sannin had confronted Sakura one day about her lack of focus, and she had forced it out of the pink-haired Kunoichi what had happened between her and Naruto. Tsunade had listened in silence as Sakura poured out her heart to her. The former Hokage only told her that there were things going on behind the scenes, and in time the brat would snap out of it. Sakura wasn't sure exactly what the Hokage was talking about, but she did know that there had been little harmony in Konoha since Danzo had managed to worm his way into the role of Hokage. His iron grip over everyone really wasn't helping him gain popularity. Either way, she figured she needed to remove at least one obstacle in her love life by trying to set up a meeting with her former teammate. If she could get Sasuke at least to agree to a meeting with her, then maybe she could set up a reunion between him and Naruto. There was no way Sasuke could see back to the village while Danzo was Hokage, but maybe without Madara and Orochimaru in the picture, Sasuke would be more open to change. It could be just a silly childhood fantasy for Team 7 to be whole again. But she at least had to try, and as long as Naruto didn't seem to want to give it up, maybe she could at least help to speed up the process. The winds started to whip around the village as Sakura gave the sealed message to the courier ninja who was on his way to the Wave Country. A storm was coming, and she didn't know how long it would be before it reached Konoha. Naruto and Sai were in the men's locker room along with several other members of ANBU, getting ready to go home for the day after a long night keeping watch over the city. Sai was temporarily assigned to Naruto's team while Sakura was working at the hospital. The only benefit of having grown up en route, as far as Sai was concerned, was that he outranked even Naruto and Sakura's Taicho, but he had been the only one available to fill in that week. Naruto quickly and quietly got dressed as the fully dressed Sai turned to talk to his friend. So I was thinking, maybe you could help me with this girl I know that's having problems, Sai began. And what in our history together makes you think that I'm a smooth talker when it comes to the female population? Naruto asked, raising a single eyebrow. Let's just say that she's about as stubborn as you are. I thought maybe since you were an expert in that field you could help me out, Sai said with a straight face. Haha, very funny. So who is this mystery girl? Naruto asked as he put on his sage coat. The days were finally getting colder and he had to pull it out of his closet as the end of September approached. It wouldn't be long before his 21st birthday, not tea. Had he ever really looked forward to the festival celebrating the Kyuubi's capture? Come on, I'm meeting her for breakfast before she goes to work. My treat, Sai said as he started to leave the locker room. Hi, anything for free food, Datbeo, he grumbled as he walked behind his elusive friend. He wasn't in the mood to play friendly, but Sai had piqued his interest. The offer of food helped. He said goodbye to the other ANBU in the locker room and followed Sai out the door. As they walked down the street, Naruto noticed that they were going toward Sakura's favorite restaurant where she liked to go for breakfast. He had wanted to see her, but he still wasn't sure if she wanted to see him. Naruto just hoped that she wouldn't be there this morning. Sure enough, Sai led him into the very restaurant he had been thinking of, and the hostess led them toward the back of the dining room. He could see a pink head already seated with her back towards them as Sai and Naruto were led to her booth. The hostess set down some menus and they sat down across from Sakura, who looked a little surprised and disappointed to see who Sai had brought with him. Naruto sat down last, leaving room for escape if he needed it. Sai. Naruto, she said, trying not to act surprised. Sakura, replied Sai. Hi Sakura-chan, Naruto said without looking her in the eyes. I already ordered since you were running late, Sai. Tsunade expects me to meet her in half an hour, so I hope whatever it is you wanted to talk about doesn't take longer than that, Sakura said, giving Sai a warning glance. She had a sneaking suspicion that Sai was trying to play matchmaker this morning. Sai ignored her comment and turned toward Naruto. This is the girl I was talking about. I told you she was about as stubborn as you are, he said matter-of-factly. Hey, Sakura shot back in defense. The waiter returned to take Sai and Naruto's order and to bring Sakura her order. She wasn't eating much, letting Naruto know that she was worried about something again. Probably having to do with him. She also had a cup of tea that smelled an awful lot like chamomile, which meant she was trying to calm her nerves. Sakura broke apart her chopsticks and began to eat. Sai could see he was going to have to do most of the talking. So Sakura, did you know that Naruto here has a girl that he has a serious crush on? She looked trying not to send daggers his direction with her eyes. She works at the hospital. Maybe you know her, although he hasn't spoken to her in a week, probably over some misunderstanding. He's really had a rough month. What with the meeting he had with the Hokage and all. Sai said, trying to break the ice the best he knew how. Sai bringing up his meeting with the Hokage made Naruto glare at his teammate. He had a very good idea which meeting Sai was talking about, and he wasn't willing to talk about that yet. Sakura just looked up from her breakfast looking a little confused and curious as Sai spoke. Sai was just glad one of them seemed interested in his one-sided conversation. Sai, Naruto growled in warning. He had really wanted Sakura to hear this coming from him, not have his socially awkward friend tell her. Sakura held up her hand to let him know she wanted to hear what Sai was about to say. Naruto kept quiet, not wanting to risk her anger this morning. What meeting? Sai had Sakura right where he wanted her. It seems that the Hokage has put some restrictions on my friend here. It seems he is no longer allowed to leave the village due to security reasons. Really? What security reasons? She asked. Sai definitely had her full attention now. Can't go into it, tongue seal and all. But, I can tell you that they are afraid of who he's been looking for the last few years. Sasuke? Naruto asked. He finally had decided to join the conversation. He knew there had to be another reason behind the Hokage's restriction on him. But Sasuke's nothing new. Why would he keep Naruto in the village now? Sakura asked. I don't know exactly. But that wasn't the only order my friend here received that day, Sai continued. Naruto hung his head momentarily, but the arrival of their order made him look up again. Catching sight of Sakura's look of worry. She looked away from him when she saw him looking at her, looking at him. So what was this other order? She asked her artistic friend. It seems the Hokage and Daimyo are planning on a political marriage for him and he's been ordered to remain single. I don't think he's even told the girl he likes about this. You can't be serious, Sakura replied. The color had all but drained from her face as she looked at Naruto, who was refusing to make eye contact with her by hiding his eyes behind his long bangs. Naruto. There it was. Naruto's big problem out in the open, and both he and Sakura didn't know what to do now that it was out there. Sai just left the conversation at that and started to eat his meal. His turn to talk was over, and now it was up to Naruto and Sakura if they wanted to heal the wounds between them. "I'm sorry, Sakura-chan," he said, sounding defeated. He left his untouched meal there and walked out of the restaurant. Sakura followed him out of the restaurant after leaving her part of the bill on the table and saying a quick goodbye to Sai. The art jutsu user wasn't worried about how breakfast had turned out. He had just wanted his two best friends to start talking again, and he had figured out that this was the order that was the root of their problems over the past few weeks. He just didn't know how deep the feelings went that were related to those problems. Sakura raced across the rooftops looking for Naruto. She had a good idea as to where he had gone, but she kept her eyes open just in case. Looking in the direction of the Hokage monument, Sakura saw a yellow and red streak race up to the top of the mountain before disappearing just behind the Sandame's head. She bounded up after him, hoping that he was planning to stop sometime soon. When Sakura had reached the top of the monument, she found Naruto sitting on a fallen tree with his head in his hands. He didn't even raise his head when she approached. Sakura knelt down on the ground in front of him and took both of his hands in hers, bringing them down so that she could try to see his face. His hair hid his eyes, but she knew that he was silently crying. "Naruto. I'm sorry, Sakura no Hana. I didn't know how to tell you that you are in a dead-end relationship. I had hoped to give you the freedom to shout your feelings from the top of the Hokage monument." But, he began as the emotions choked up the words in his throat. He started again after trying to gain some control over his feelings, but, no matter what I do, it always gets screwed up. "Naruto. Don't blame yourself," she said as she too started to tear up. "The Hokage's decision has nothing to do with us. He's just trying to control you. He can't control what I feel for you. Don't let him win. How can you say it has nothing to do with us?" Naruto spoke as he stood up, wiping the tears from his eyes on his sleeve. "This is a direct order that threatens to keep us apart forever. Just because that old man has been trying to control you and your family, since before you were born, doesn't give him the excuse to tear us apart," she said defiantly as she stood up and walked over to where he was standing. His back was still toward her. "Naruto, look at me. I love you. He can't control my feelings for you. I want to be with you no matter what. We'll figure this out, believe it," she said, throwing his famous childhood catchphrase at him. He let out a half-hearted laugh as he looked her in the eye. "Sakura no Hana, what did I ever do to deserve your love? You have always given your all for me. Sometimes it feels if my love is not enough to repay the debt I owe," she said as she put her arms around his torso and under his coat. He returned her embrace, and they stood there on top of the Hokage monument wrapped in their love for one another. The room was pitch black. He could hear the screams of his family in the background, but he couldn't see them. His brother's image flashed before his eyes, his Sharingan staring back at him, the image of their parents lying on the ground in miniature before him. "Tosen, Kasen, Nisan, why did you show me all of this? To make you hate me," the image of his brother said before fading into the void. "I tried to show what I was capable of without killing everyone," he cried out to the void. "You are not even worth killing. If you wish to kill me, hate me, detest me and survive in an unsightly way, run. Run and cling to life," echoed through his mind. He knelt down trying to block the sound from his ears. Uchiha Madara's face was the next to appear. He could only see one unmasked eye glaring at him. Itachi did it all to save Konoha. The face changed into Itachi's again. "I'm sorry, Sasuke. But this is the last time." Madara's face emerged next to Itachi's. Both seemed like they were laughing at his weakness. "Itachi was right, you are not even worth killing. Just an Uchiha fledgling," hissed the image of Orochimaru, making the trio of tormentors complete. Ellipsis. "No." Sasuke woke up drenched in sweat. He was sitting up and panting hard. The cold night air was causing goose bumps on the moist skin of his naked chest and arms as he sat alone in the dark, fisting his blanket trying to regain his sense of reality. It was that dream again. He was having it more and more often lately, memories of Itachi. His parents lying on the floor, Madara, and Orochimaru. His pathetic reasons for survival were to live any other way than how his brother had lived or wanted him to live, except for the hate. Sasuke looked around the cave that was their temporary home. It was dark, cold, damp and musty. Since Suigetsu had abandoned them to chase after Hoshigaki Kisame, they had been moving from hiding place to hiding place, avoiding Madara's long reach as much as possible. He had not been surprised at how easily Suigetsu had died fighting Kisame, but he managed to take Kisame with him. This had caused Madara to be a little more cautious without one of his right-hand men to help him in his quest for power. Madara had been true to his word that if Taka had let him down he would kill them. He had tried, but somehow the three of them had escaped with their lives. Lies. All of it lies. Sasuke cringed at the thought that his life was always just someone else's attempt to control him because he was an Uchiha. Karen had tried to comfort him with her womanhood, but he hadn't been interested. Jugo hadn't been much help. He only knew calm or completely insane, nothing in between. They were living life day by day, waiting for when Madara finally caught up with them or they died on a mission. Sasuke secretly wanted someone to end his misery. That's why he kept accepting low-paying, dangerous missions. Karen and Jugo would both complain, but they stayed for reasons he didn't understand. Sasuke got out of bed and threw his shirt on before going to the entrance of the cave. Only 2 hours again, he thought to himself as he recounted how many nights he had been going on, at most 2 hours of sleep a night. He was tired, but whenever he closed his eyes, he only saw images of them. He tried to recall the last time he felt relaxed enough to sleep all night long. Maybe back in Konoha. Right before I left, he thought before shaking that line of thought from his mind. Sasuke had a hard time remembering if he had ever really had a peaceful night's sleep since going to Orochimaru. There he could always hear people screaming, no matter how faint. When he was with Madara he awoke at the littlest of sounds, fearing that someone was always in the room. Zetsu's strange habits hadn't helped, as he felt like the strange Venus flytrap of a man was always watching his every move. He heard a sound behind him and whipped around. Sharingan activated to find a bat adjusting its hold on the ceiling of the cave. Sasuke let out a shaky sigh. When had his calm and controlled persona been replaced by the jumpy, paranoid man he had become? He relaxed his stance, his eyes turning from red to black. Walking to his chosen spot on a rock just to the left of the cave, he sat down and gazed across the water. The mist was just starting to form on the wide expanse of water as the night air reached its lowest temperature just before sunrise. This was his favorite time of day. It was completely calm and he could hear everything for miles. He knew that everyone was asleep and would be for at least another hour. Maybe he would walk around the village this morning and see if there was any work or missions on the community bulletin board. He and his team had helped Tazuna carry supplies last week and had earned enough for living expenses. The old man still had no clue as to why Sasuke was hanging around Wave Country and not back in Konoha. Sasuke figured it was better just to let the old man remain naive about the whole thing and merely grunted at the questions he and Inari had fired off at him. Next time he picked up work like that he would have to go into a henge just to avoid the never-ending questions. The village was quiet this morning. He was up well before any of the vendors and that was just how he liked it. The fewer he ran into the better. Sasuke reached the community board and quickly scanned the advertisements and notices. He noticed one letter that looked strangely out of place. It had a small emblem on the upper left-hand corner that to his surprise looked like a smudged Uchiha crest. He pulled it down from its spot on the board and examined it more closely. It appeared to look like an ordinary letter, but there was something that seemed so familiar. He took a sniff and he could smell the slightest hint of a fruity fragrance. Cherry, he thought as his memory told him that that particular fragrance was familiar. He activated his Sharingan hoping to gain more clues and realized that a seal had appeared that only the Sharingan could see. Sakura, he whispered. She was the only one who knew this Fuin no Jutsu. He hadn't even bothered to show Karen. Why would she try to contact him? His curiosity was getting the better of him now. It had been 4 years since they last met. She was beautiful and very dangerous. She also didn't seem too eager to have him back in her life, which was a complete turnaround from when he had left 8 years ago. This had caught him off guard, so he was really wondering why she had tried to contact him now. The young Uchiha had no urge to contact his former teammate, but he wanted to know what she wanted. He bit his thumb and wiped the blood on the seal to release it. Upon opening it, he was surprised that it didn't say much. She just wanted to meet him at a certain ledge overlooking a stream on the east side of Konoha. All he had to do was show up on a certain day and at a certain time. No questions asked, no information given. Might as well. It could be a trap, but if she went to the trouble of getting in touch with me, it may be worth my time. If not, it could mean one less annoyance in my life, he said under his breath. She was dangerous, but he still considered her weak compared to either him or Naruto. Getting rid of her wouldn't be a step outside of his plans anyway. He still wanted to go after the Hokage and his advisors, but they lacked the manpower. Nevertheless, suicide missions were becoming more and more interesting lately. Maybe this was the chance he was looking for to get back at the village of Konoha for all the pain that he had suffered and was still suffering. Whatever her plans were didn't matter. He had plans of his own. Naruto walked up to the door feeling more nervous than he had ever felt in his life. He took a deep breath and almost forgot to let it out before he let his knuckles give 3 raps on the door before him. Yosh. Okay, buddy. This is it. Hokage's orders are no, time to make a good impression. I want to do this right before I ask Sakura to marry me, he thought as he heard footsteps on the other side of the door. Sakura's father opened the door and greeted Naruto with a pleasantly surprised expression on his face. Naruto, this is a surprise. Won't you please come in? Sakura's father said, stepping out of the doorway to allow her teammate inside. Her father was a tall man with straight brown hair. He wore a civilian-style garment similar to what Jiraiya used to wear, but with the Haruno family emblem on his left shoulder. Naruto couldn't help but notice that Sakura looked more like her father, but with her mother's pink hair and dimensions. Thank you, Haruno-san, Naruto said nervously. Breathing is good. Who is it, dear? Naruto heard Sakura's mother call from the kitchen. It's Sakura's teammate, Naruto, he answered back. She walked in from the kitchen wiping her hands on her apron and gave him a smile that reminded him of Sakura's smile. Naruto, what brings you here? Sakura's mother asked. Actually, I was wondering if I could ask you both something, he said nervously as it felt like his heart was pounding in his ears. Sakura's parents looked at him as he seemed to have gained their undivided attention. He took a deep breath before continuing. I've come to ask for your permission to, well, I was wondering if I could have your blessing. I want to ask Sakura to marry me, he finally blurted out. Sakura's parents just looked at each other with looks of disbelief as they both took in what Naruto had just asked them. Sakura's father then looked at the young shinobi, the strongest in the village, and Naruto looked like he could pass out at any moment. He nodded to his wife and she returned it with a smile. Sakura's mother walked up to the nervous blonde and wrapped her arms around him as he stood wide-eyed and in shock. We would love to give you our blessing. Welcome to the family, dear, Sakura's mother said as her father walked up and placed a hand on his shoulder. Now don't think you're getting off that easy, son. We still have a lot to talk about. Why don't you have a seat? Haruno-san said as he motioned for Naruto to sit down on the nearby couch. Sakura's mother sat next to the still very nerve House shinobi as her father sat across from him. Naruto let out a big sigh as he prepared himself for questions from his future in-laws. The hard part was over. A small smile started to form on his lips, as he realized he was one step closer to marrying the girl of his dreams. 1 week later, Sasuke sat on a large boulder overlooking the ocean. He had a letter in his hand, but he wasn't reading it. It dangled from his hand as he sat looking out over the water thinking of the letter's author. Time to visit an old friend, he said as he crumpled up the letter with one hand. That's it for today, I will stop here. I hope you all enjoyed this video. If you please consider subscribe and make sure to hit that like button, share with your friends, and don't forget to check out author of this story. Details in description.